I start, I'm going to take just 1 minute, because that's all we really have, of personal privilege. I just want to recognize that today is a very special day. We are 1 week away from the first UCF football game of the season. Yeah, and as tradition states, I have a tradition that I only wear UCF gear for the entire week prior to leading up to the game. Some years it has brought my boys a lot of luck. Other years they have failed me. But I keep the tradition because you never know. If I stop, we don't know what's going to happen. And this is an especially big year because we are new to the Big 12. So I want to make a few statements because I want to be very clear about a few things. Our colors are black and gold. When we wear blue, we lose games. We need to stop wearing blue. We are not Space U. We are UCF Knights. And our mascot is the Nitro. It is a knight. It is not Citron. It is not anything that's related to space. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to go on record and state, we are the UCF Knights. We are black and gold. Go Knights, charge on. Thank you, I'm done. All right, now let's start.
And your nails also.
Oh, and yes, because I got to get my nails done too. So it's a very special day in the Gallo household. My husband and I have already had a few conversations, and yeah. So anyways. What?
I love your enthusiasm.
Yeah. Most couples lose their husband during football season. I often joke that my husband and I actually become closer because we actually have something to talk about all the time, which is football. So it's a thing in my house. Charge on. All right, so let's begin this meeting. We ask for the courtesy of the board members, staff, and those that are participating electronically that you please silence your cell phones. Remember, I don't need to say that part. The standby. Good morning and welcome to the Orange County School Board's work session, which had been scheduled today for the purpose of discussing school board policy DFAA, use of surplus funds, school board policy JRA, student records, and social media as it relates to school board members. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comment because this is not a regularly scheduled school board meeting. No action will be taken, and there will be no pre-agenda period in which the public normally addresses the board on relevant topics that are related to the work of the board. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Board members are attending in person with the exception of Chair Jacobs. We are still waiting for a few board members to arrive, and we will welcome them when they get here. I want to remind the public that board members will not be engaging in outside electronic or digital communication during the meeting, so we can focus on the meeting itself, giving our attention to the matters immediately before us. Should you want to contact us, please continue to do so before or after each meeting. To my fellow board members and district staff, when speaking, please make sure your microphone is turned on and speak directly into it so our YouTube and Orange TV viewers can hear you clearly. Now we are going to have a moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance. If you would be so inclined to pray for the UCF Knights as they start their football season for health this season, we would appreciate it. Thank you. We can call the prayers when we get. And now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to its republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I know. People, they'll show up. All right, Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today we will begin our work session reviewing policy DFAA, the use of surplus funds. We have our CFO, Doreen Concolino, as well as Steve Compton, that will be doing the presentation for the board this morning.
Good morning, Chair Gallo. Good morning, Chair Gallo, board members, and Superintendent Vasquez. Today we bring to you the proposed revisions to policy DFAA, use of surplus funds. The agenda includes the timeline, summary of actions, proposed revisions, next steps, and then questions and discussions. The tentative schedule is as follows. Policy DFAA was brought to Cabinet on August 21st. Today, August 24th, is the work session. The Rule Development Workshop is scheduled for September 14th, and the board approval is scheduled for September 26th. The purpose. Policy DFAA is being revised to include updates to the safekeeping custodial section by a third-party custodian as it relates to securities that are purchased by the district. The action summary revisions have been made to the existing policy language to include content, formatting, and terminology edits consistent with the Florida Administrative Code. And now we will review the red line version of policy DFAA. This past May, we were notified by our current custodian that they were no longer going to provide custodial services to clients. Custodial services are provided by financial institutions by holding securities in our name. They also administer the monthly principal and interest payments that we receive. Several banks were contacted in order to find a replacement custodian, and as part of the discussion, we provided a copy of our policy to make sure that they could abide by it. Numerous banks had reservations about the language in the safekeeping custody of investments section of the policy. This section was originally adopted in 2010, and the industry has had changes since then. Here is a summary of the proposed policy changes, which begin on page 7 of policy DFAA. The first change is to section 16A. The original policy states, all securities, with the exception of certificates of deposit, shall be held with a custodian. We are adding local government investment pools and money market funds that do not have to be held by a custodian. These are classified as securities, although not individual bonds and treasuries. However, it is unrealistic to have these funds under a custodian. We have direct access to these funds and move the money as warranted. Additionally, in this section, the definition of third-party custodian was removed as it is encompassed in other sections. The policy will read, all securities with the exception of certificates of deposit, local government investment pools, and money market accounts shall be held with a third-party custodian, and all securities purchased by and all collateral obtained by the district shall be properly designated as an asset of the district. The securities must be held in an account separate and apart from the assets of the financial institution. The custodian shall accept transaction instructions only from those persons who have been duly authorized by the superintendent or designee in writing. No withdrawal of securities in whole or in part shall be made from safekeeping or shall be permitted unless by such a duly authorized person. In Section 16B, the superintendent or designee can enter into agreements with a custodian and doesn't require board approval. The policy will read as, the superintendent or designee shall execute all third-party custodial agreements. Such agreements may include letters of authority from the board, details as to the responsibilities of each party, method of notification of security purchases, sales and delivery, procedures related to repurchase agreements and wire transfers, safekeeping and transaction costs, procedures in case of wire failure or other unforeseen mishaps, and describing the liability of each party. The last change to this policy is in 16C. To streamline the language, the policy will read as, the custodian shall provide the board with safekeeping receipts that provide detailed information on the securities held by the custodian. security transactions between a broker-dealer and the custodian involving purchase or sale of securities by transfer of money or securities must be made on a delivery versus payment basis, if applicable, to ensure that the custodian will have the security or money as appropriate in hand at the conclusion of the transaction. Securities held as collateral shall be held free. Lastly, on page 9, section 17D, formatting edits were proposed to remove the letter S, the addition of quotation marks, as well as the removal of a comma. Now I will turn it back over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Doreen, and members of the board. We are prepared to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? Member Front.
Just for people who are watching who maybe aren't versed in all the lingo, can we just have a description of what the custodian, and maybe that was described in the beginning, but just one more time, just so they know it's not somebody who's cleaning.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that first? I don't have. What? I need your. Well, I'm just going to read the description again off the top. I'll.
Is it not working?
Yeah, I'm not. Is it working?
Yes,
There you go.
yes, we can hear you.
I'll kind of paraphrase for everyone then. So when we go out and buy securities, bonds, or treasuries, being that we don't actually hold the coupon, the actual paper bond with us, it's held at what we call a safekeeping custodian relationship. They administer all the principal and interest payments that we get. They provide us reports, statements. Basically, they're the middle person between the broker and us, since we don't have direct access to the bond market. We have to go through a broker. They hold the paper for us, so they're basically the middleman. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, do we just need, Mrs. Inval, do we just need consensus from the board to move forward with the red
Yes,
lines?
We already have deadlines. She went through the timelines with you. So yes, as long as you're okay with that,
Everybody's okay moving forward?
let's move forward.
Wonderful. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
so much.
We're going to do a little switcheroo with the presenters. It's going to be easier
Great.
for John and I to talk to you there than sitting up here, so.
Okay.
That means you got to.
So our next policy is policy JRA, student records. And we will hear from both our general and deputy counsel on proposed revisions to this policy.
Thank you. Welcome, Mrs. Inval and Mr. Pomerini.
Thank you. So we don't have a formal, is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So we don't have a formal presentation like you do for policy DFAA for this one, because this is the first time this is coming to you, just for you to take a look at, and I believe there needs to be some discussion on directory information from the board. So we did take a look at this, and because we have a new rule that was effective as of yesterday, we have some additional language that's in here. We are also we're adding some additional language to be a little more clear that's required by the ESC policies and procedures. So the first section is called confidentiality of student records. This is a proposed new section required by section B8 of the exceptional student education policies and procedures that's required by the FDOE, the Bureau of Exceptional Student Education. It references all those. A lot of this stuff is already in your ESE policies and procedures, that's in your student progression plan, but it's buried. And so the recommendation is to add it to the student records policy so it's clear and all in one place, because you know your student progression plan is pages and pages long and it might get lost. So this additional language just tracks what's required in the ESE P&P. Do you want me to read it to you, or are you okay with that? No? No? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. The next section under legal name of student, this section 2 is being added. We had Rule 6A-1.0955 Florida Administrative Code that was effective yesterday. And it says, the new provision says that the district must make provisions for parents, legal guardians to specify the use of any deviation from their child's legal name in school. A parent legal guardian who wishes for a child to be called a name other than the child's legal name shall complete a form provided by the district, giving school personnel permission to call the child by a name other than the legal name. A child will be called by the child's legal name provided upon registration if such form is not completed by the parent legal guardian. And this is the new form that we have implemented for this year, because we did have the draft rule and we kind of assumed they were going to approve it, so we have already implemented that this year. The next proposed change, we just have some minor formality and technical edits there, so you can scoot down there. To section 7, we added that the annual notification that's required. Every school, every year, and it's in our Code of Student Conduct, we provide parents, legal guardians, and eligible students the annual notification of the right to access student records, the right to copy it, the right to waiver of access, right to challenge information contained, everything. That annual notification is found in the Code of Student Conduct. You have a whole section in the Code of Student Conduct, I believe it's section 1, that is specifically devoted to FERPA. And so all that information is in there. So we just added specifically to policy that the annual notification is in the code. And also student records are confidential and exempt. So we're just making sure that that language complies with the section, with the statute. We're not sure if school does not issue a handbook. We're assuming they all issue them, but if they issue them, they have to have the same language in here. And so, if we can go back to directory information in a minute, I want to go ahead and add the other 2 things that we've added, and then we can talk about directory information. Under the access to student records section, the following persons have access to student records to the extent the district has determined these persons have a legitimate educational interest in viewing those records has been added. That language is consistent with FERPA. And then section 2 has been added, and that is parents, legal guardians are presumed to have authority to inspect and review records relating to the parents, legal guardians, children upon verification of the parents, legal guardian's identity. This is just so that they understand that they do have the authority to inspect. We do in limited circumstances. Sometimes we have where parental rights have been terminated and parents do not have the legal authority to do that. It's rare, but this is a presumption that if we don't have that court order, that you can go ahead and you have access to your children's records. And then it's a provision, this is also part of the ESE SP&P that we did. If a student record includes information about more than one student, the parent legal guardian may only review the information relating to that parent legal guardian's children. Other student information must be removed or redacted. This is a practice that we have always done. We're just putting it into policy. Same thing for this one. Consent from the parent legal guardian or the consent of an eligible student who has reached the age of majority must be obtained before personally identifiable information is disclosed to anyone other than officials of the district described herein or other party with a legitimate interest in the record or is specifically authorized by FERPA in Section 1002.22 Florida statutes. The consent must be in writing and must specify the records to be disclosed, the purpose of the disclosure, and identify the party or class to whom the disclosure may be made. This is already something that we do in practice. We already have a FERPA form that parents can fill out. We do require that they provide, like let's say they're out of state, we require that they provide us with a copy of the driver's license so we know that we are actually sending that personally identifiable student information to the proper party. As it pertains to students with disabilities, the consent must be obtained before personally identifiable information is released to officials of participating agencies that provide or pay for transition services. And each school shall keep a record of third parties that access a student's record when the third party is granted access as provided herein or as provided by FERPA. Third parties are people other than the parent, legal guardian, or authorized staff referenced herein. The record shall include the name of the third party, the date access was given, the records accessed, and the purpose for which the party is authorized to use these records. Again, it's something that we already have in practice. We're just putting it into this policy so it's not buried in our student progression plan. We added section A, B, C, and D, a response from the district school for, the parent legal, starting with section 4. As it pertains to students with disabilities as defined under the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, IDEA, parents, legal guardians are permitted to inspect and review any educational records related to their children that are collected, maintained, or used by the district school without unnecessary delay and before any meeting regarding an individual education plan, individualized family service plan, or education plan, or any hearing related to the identification, evaluation, or educational placement of the child, or the provision of a free, appropriate public education to the student, and in no case more than 30 days from the request. We try to do it quicker than 30 days. Sometimes hearings come up quickly, so we do accommodate our parents the best we can. The parent legal guardian has the right to A, response from the district school for reasonable explanation and interpretation of the records. B, request that the district school provide copies of the records if failure to do so would deprive the parent legal guardian of the right to review the records. And C, have a representative of the parent legal guardian inspect and review the records. A lot of times, if they have like an advocate with them or if they're represented by a counsel, we require the parents to sign off that that person can also see the records. Again, this is all procedure that we have, but we're putting it into policy, recommending to put it in policy. And then request a list of the types of records and location of records relating to the parent legal guardian's child or children. In the statute, the district can charge the parent legal guardian for a fee for copies of the parent legal guardian's records, the child's records, so long as the fee does not prevent the parent legal guardian from accessing the records. So most of the time, our schools will give them free copies of everything, but it's when they ask for multiple copies, that's when it taxes the resources of the school, so sometimes we'll charge them for additional copies. What's different from a public records, in the next session you will see that, a search or retrieval fee by the district may not be charged. So when it comes to our records of our students with disabilities, it's not for public records, we actually charge a service fee for the time it takes to gather the records. But in this case, we don't charge that service fee. I wanted to make sure that was in policy as well. And then, so we have had in place for a number of years, for as long as I can remember, the procedures, the way that parents can contest the contents of a student records. And so before we just had a general statement, but we decided that it would be a good idea to probably put this into policy so parents were aware of the process. The procedures for challenging student records as inaccurate, misleading, or a violation of the student's privacy rights must, at minimum, meet the following requirements. The district shall hold the hearing with a reasonable time after it has received the request for the hearing from the parent legal guardian or eligible student, but in no event more than 30 days after receiving such request for a hearing. The district shall give the parent legal guardian or eligible student notice of the date, time, and place reasonably in advance of the hearing. The hearing may be conducted by any individual, including an official of the educational agency or institution, who does not have a direct interest in the outcome of the hearing. And the district shall give the parent legal guardian or eligible student a full and fair opportunity to present evidence relevant to the issues raised regarding whether the student record is inaccurate, misleading, or a violation of the student's right to privacy. The parent legal guardian or eligible student may, at their own expense, be assisted or represented by one or more individuals of his or her own choice, including an attorney. And then the district shall make its decision in writing within a reasonable period of time after the hearing, but in no event should the decision be issued more than 21 days after the hearing. The decision must be based solely on the evidence presented at the hearing and must include a summary of the evidence and the reasons for the decision. If the district decides the information is inaccurate, misleading, or otherwise in violation of the privacy or other rights of the child, the district will amend the record accordingly and inform the parent legal guardian in writing. If the district decides the information is not inaccurate, misleading, or a violation of the privacy or other rights of the student, the district will inform the parent legal guardian of the right to place in the record a statement commenting on the information or setting forth any reason for disagreement with the district decision. The parent legal guardian statement will be maintained by the district as part of the student's record as long as the district maintains the record of the contested portion of the record. If the record is disclosed by the district to any party, the explanation must also be disclosed. In accordance with our ESE SP&P, we also recommend adding a new section called Destruction of Personally Identifiable Information. The district will inform parents, legal guardians when personally identifiable information is no longer needed to provide education services to the student. This information must be destroyed at the request of the parent, legal guardian. A permanent record of the student's name, address, telephone number, grades, attendance record, classes attended, grade level completed, and year completed may be maintained without time limitation. And I believe that's the last part.
Wanna go back to directory?
Yes, now we want to go back up to directory information. Do you have any questions about what we just went over? I know it was a lot of reading. I sent it to you ahead of time.
Yes, we do have
Okay.
several members wishing to speak. Member Salamanca.
Thank you, Chair. So my question was on the student's name, the part that's in the Code of Conduct. I've got this question from two parents, which was, what constitutes different name? Like if it's Robert, Bob, Bobby, the specifics of nicknames and things like that. Is it as far as that, or how specific are we talking here?
Yeah, I'll take it. Is this on? Yes, it is. The rule itself states, quote, any deviation from the student's legal name. So any deviation is, I wrote the memo on it and I used my son as the example. He was thrilled when I did that. Sometimes he's called Rob, sometimes he's called Robbie. His real name is Robert. So the form would require that if we were going to call him Rob or Robbie, that this be filled out and approved by the parent.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I think some parents weren't sure how specific they had to be about nicknames as well, and it sounds like they should be specific.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
and any means any. So if it is any deviation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Salamanca. Member Felder. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make sure parents know that that's not on any legal documents. It's their transcripts, everything else will have their child's legal
That is
name, because there was a
correct.
question tied to that as
Yes,
well.
that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
If-
Vasquez.
To add to that, if parent wanted to make a change to the legal documents, they would have to go to court and get a legal name change in order to effectuate that. If we're presented with an order of the court effectuating a name change, we will in fact utilize the changed name as ordered by the court. But unless and until we have that, all the official documents we have will reflect the legal name that was provided when the child enrolled.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Palmerini. Member Felder.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I have a question, and maybe you explained it, but I just need some clarification. Okay, the records, I think it was page 5. You talked about the student records. Okay, in the event that the parents give the school permission to refer to the child by the name other than the birth name, I see all of that has to be in the record. What do we do about the previous records, like before these laws were put in, say, when the child first started going to school in kindergarten? Okay, I started school in, 62. And maybe now I've changed my name because I have a gender change or whatever. How are we going to keep the records accurate that this is the same person? The reason why I ask that question is because records, your attorneys, records follow you even after you die. Your record follows you. So I'm just wondering, while we're trying to, appease our parents and children and students, how do we know that John now was really Jamie? How is that going to be kept? How do we keep up with that? Student. Okay,
You wanna
student
start,
number?
or-
I'll start. So the records are accurate at the time they're created. So John may have started as John in school. There may have been some subsequent name change or whatever later on a court document. And so that will be in the record, and moving forward to be the same. We do not go progressively backwards and change anything, because at the time the record was created, at the time John was enrolled
John.
in kindergarten,
Yeah.
John was John. He was later,
Jamie.
or Jonathan or whatever,
Okay,
yes.
so Board Member Casadena just said to me that we have a student number. So that I know, I still know my student number from high school. So it maintains, okay, I was just concerned because I was just wondering how were we going to be able to keep up with that, but the student number, so that means we're going to have to do our part to make sure that that portion of the child's identity is accurate and it is kept up. Because you can imagine the confusion? Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Felder. Member Caster-Dental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to hold until we discuss the directory information. Is that coming up next? Were you going to go into that more? So,
Want to hold? Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Member Gould?
Two things. If you'd go to page 8. This is the only sentence that gives me this is the only sentence that gives me a little heartburn, having had more than I wanted cases that have come before us when parents are appealing. The decision must be based solely on the evidence presented at the hearing and must include summary of the evidence and reasons for the decision. It's the solely that I have trouble with, because we have had instances where things have come to light that were not included. And I understand we're in a quasi-judicial, but we are not judges. And we have the ability to listen to any evidence we want to. And so I do have an issue with the word solely in there.
Madam Chair, I can address this.
Yeah,
So,
let's go at it again,
Mr.
John.
Pomeroy.
This issue will never come to you all. It's the district administrator who's doing this. So I can tell you, in the 13 years I've been here, I've been the hearing officer both times we've had a challenge under this rule. Okay? So it will be in our conference room. The parent will come up there. They will present all of their evidence to me as to why the record was misleading, inaccurate at that time. And so it is based solely, we're not talking, it's not like the situation where you have a discipline with a child and you all will typically say, I want to know what that child, is there any record with the child, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like this. We are talking specifically about a record that may or may not be misleading or inaccurate. So they will present their evidence, and I will tell them, okay, tell me why you think this document is inaccurate, misleading, or a violation of your student's privacy rights. And they will tell me stuff, and they will present documents, and I'll say, is there anything else that you would like to say on this? And they'll keep going, and I'll say, is there anything else? And I keep saying, is there anything else, until they say, no, we've told you everything we wanted to tell you. At that point, the record's closed in front of me. And this is coming right away out of the regulation. So that's what
The
the
word solely is in the
Yes.
regulation?
Yes.
Okay,
So
I don't like it.
I, of course, do not comment on whether I like the regulation. I just comment on what it is.
I can.
Yes.
And I just think when parents, and here's why. It's not because I don't trust our process. I want to make that clear. Parents don't know our process. They don't live that every day. So whenever they're bringing a challenge forward, they don't know what they should have done till they've done it. And then they have that, 2020 vision looking back and the insights of the process. And they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to include this. I didn't know I didn't have that. And that's why whenever there's language like solely in anything that we publish, it just gives me a little bit of heartburn. But if it's in the regulation, there's not a lot we can do about it.
Member
Sorry, go
Gould,
ahead.
just wanted to, Sarah Kopesky's in the back, and she deals with these issues as well. We have, a lot of times, this will never get to the hearing stage, because if there's something inaccurate, our principals have the ability to say, okay, the record's inaccurate, and a lot of times, this will get solved at the school level before it ever gets
So
there.
there's a mechanism to
Yeah.
remedy without it being
Yeah, without.
a concrete
correct.
wall.
There
Okay.
is a recent example where the school was identified as the wrong school the student attended. We looked back through, it was the wrong school. Yes, the principals can change so it's the correct school.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. So then you were talking about all the records would get destroyed, and I know over the years that's been a real concern, especially if a child made some wrong decisions in their life. How do we communicate that effectively to the parents? Is it in writing to them at some point? I just feel that gives them a little bit more comfort when they've had to maybe course correct. Because let's face it, they are, especially our teenagers. You don't need to define it any further. And they don't always make the best decisions. So how will that be actually communicated to the parents or guardians?
Do you mind?
No, go ahead.
There is, just so everybody's aware, and also with us today is Les Vaughn, who is our records management person. So him and his team there's certain rules that we have as far as how long records are retained. It's called the records retention schedule. So by law, there are things that we have to maintain certain records for a certain period of time. So for example, disciplinary records, and Les, please tell me if I'm wrong. Disciplinary records have to be maintained up to, I believe it's 3 years from when. Is he saying yes? Okay, good. 3 years from the date of the offense. So at that point, we can take care of records and not maintain them anymore. And Les can certainly talk more about the actual process. But to your point, I mean, we could put out communication that says, under the Florida Records Retention Schedule, we have to maintain, your cumulative file, I think we have to maintain permanently for up to 50 years or whatever the number is, right?
Category A records.
Come on.
What's a category?
I know enough to know when I'm over my skis.
Yes. Thank you.
There are two portions of the student record, the Category A and the Category B side. Category B, which most of the district commonly refer to as the cumulative file, that is 3 years, and that's all the supporting documentation. The Category A portion is the permanent record. That is the information we keep in our student information systems.
Okay. Is there a suggestion, maybe if they have had something come into their case, that it's embedded in a letter with that schedule and how that's defined, so that they know that's within the 3 year, this is the, lifetime record, just so that it's clear to the parents, because that's often the follow-up I get once something's kind of gone past its.
Yes, ma'am. The Category B side, which is where the discipline would usually fall in the cumulative piece, that does get destroyed. That is not kept permanently.
Okay.
The only time that some disciplinary records may have gotten imaged for transfer, but those also get extracted and destroyed when they meet their retention.
That leads me to another question. What if there is a litigation or an arrest associated with it? Does that get kept for law enforcement?
Anytime there's a legal hold, our general counsel will notify us, and we'll segregate those records until we have authority to destroy those from our general counsel.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all.
Thank you. Member Byrd?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, can I follow up on that whole line? So maybe don't leave.
Here, Les.
Or I don't know, maybe you do. I'm a little confused then on number 1 when it says the district will inform parents and guardians when personally identifiable information is no longer needed. And then it says this information must be destroyed at the request of the parent or guardians. But I thought, from what I understood, it gets destroyed after 3 years, is what he just said. So Why does it say must be destroyed at the request?
The information the permanent information is basically the directory information, the information of the student, and that's what's kept. The cumulative record we must keep by Department of State guidelines for the 3 years. And then beyond that, we do follow the guidelines pretty closely. So usually we'll keep the student record for maybe a year after that for audit purposes, if there is any audit or any question. So at that point, they are destroyed. This portion of the JRA that's been changed, our general counsel has inserted this piece in there that just reflects the changes in the administrative code.
So I think we're going to need to add, this is why it's a work session. We're going to add some more detail into that so it's specifically clear, so that we can, that's why we like to have these work sessions, because when we look at it, we're like, oh yeah, that looks great. We copied it from such and such, it's, whatever. But I see where
It's a little
there is.
confusing.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
we'll make that more clear, because we are going to bring this back to you again.
Okay, thank you. And then going back to page 8 again, with the parents contesting something, could you give an example of, other than obvious ones that we get, like discipline, and obvious if it's, a record that's wrong, like a school? Could you give us an example of when a parent would come to you with something was misleading or a violation of privacy?
I wish I had more than the obvious, but the 2 cases I've done involved a disciplinary record.
Okay.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten beyond that. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But a discipline record, if a parent, typically, if they weren't happy with a discipline and they came to you to express that and to deal with it, then they sometimes come to us for the same thing.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. So, and a lot of times, or not a lot of times, because I've done 2 of these, I think one of them was after the discipline process had went through and the discipline had been upheld. And I don't remember if it came to you all or not, but obviously if the discipline had been upheld and there was no challenge and the board didn't overturn it, then to come back on the back end and say the record is misleading and inaccurate, part of the explanation is, well, you had a disciplinary process to challenge this and you did not challenge it, or it was not overturned, and therefore it's not a misleading or inaccurate record because we made the findings. Now, of course, remember, parents aren't happy with disciplinary decisions. Under this regulation, they have the right to say, to append something in the student record to say, we disagree with this decision and here's why, and give the explanation. So that could be an avenue a parent could utilize to make sure if anybody's ever looking at the record and they feel that what the disciplinary action wasn't correct, the parent can say, we disagree with it and here's why.
Thank you. That's helpful. And the last thing I have is on the names. And the superintendent cleared up about the legal documents. I just want to, and I think this is more a question of practice, but I had this question as well. For, I'm assuming, diplomas obviously are legal name. In practice, can a student request to use their requested name at graduation be called, as opposed to their legal name, if it deviates from what's on their diploma? That's probably a superintendent question, I would assume.
From our perspective, we do not have an issue in doing that. They actually fill out cards where they put their name. I would defer to counsel if it would be any legal issue if a child's parent has not filled out a form and they are choosing to use a different name.
So this rule is relatively new. I don't think there is a legal issue if we have a form filled out that says Robert is Robbie, for that to be called out at a graduation ceremony, but the diploma would say Robert.
The legal name.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I think that's a concern for our trans students, so thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Member Byrd. All right, I have a few questions. We'll stick with the where is the form? Where can parents locate the form? And what does the form look like that they have to fill out for consent of a name change?
So it's on the website. Amy will be looking for it while we're talking here to pull it up. The form was sent to all of our principals at the beginning of the year and said, here you go ahead and use it. I can tell you when I had Meet the Teacher at my child's school, some of the teachers had already had the form ready to give out to folks, to parents. It certainly will be available at the front office if a parent wants to go in and do it. It's on our website. If we can figure out how to run the interwebs, we'll figure out and do that.
I think I need help.
Yes. So we can, I think it's certainly prominently placed on the website, but if not, of course, we'll leave that to the superintendent.
I found it yesterday and provided you the link, but I'm.
You did, in the email, in that very long email that you sent us, it was in that email.
I tried to do a short one.
So I will, yeah.
It wasn't that long. It was only one page.
Look how small that writing is.
Well,
Madam Chair.
Yes,
I
Superintendent.
believe it's on Skyward. Parents access
It's on
it,
Skyward.
through their portal. They go on Skyward. That's where they have the form about the pictures, the video, the release of information. So I know for sure it's
and here
it's
it is
there.
too. So if you go to, there's current families and new families. If you go to current families on our website and scroll down to parental rights, click on that. Thank you. And then it's in a blue box right at the top of the page. I promise.
We have a lot of grandparents, we have a lot of parents that don't know how to access Skyward.
It is on it's on the parental rights page. There's a box for it. And we're just waiting. Yes.
So,
And I know that we have open house coming up as well.
yeah, we do. There will be, obviously, and I think they're still trying to make sure that it's working in Skyward as well. As far last I heard on it, it's up and we're running. Okay.
Yes,
All right.
it's up. In fact, it is working because it changes everything. And a parent was concerned that now all of their legal documents, I forgot what the daughter's nickname was, that they were also going to be, was it Ella? Yeah, Ella. So it is working. We can certainly remind principals that during open house that have the parents have access or have a hard copy of the form if they need it to be filled out. My understanding is that the students that would like to be called by a name other than their given name, not necessarily nicknames, but like a transgender child, they are filling out the forms. They're aware of that process.
And then it's up to the teacher if they want to use that name or not use that name, correct?
That is correct.
I know that Member Castro-Gentle has a quick question, so I'm going to go to her and then I'll come back to me.
I would think that a note from a parent with their legal signature would also suffice. It doesn't necessarily have to be this legal form. I would think that a note saying, my child can be called Billy, Bill, William, Will, Honey, whatever they want. They can list all those and sign their name, and that would still be considered a legal document that would accomplish the same thing. Is that right?
Yeah, it would still have the same legal effect. We did the form just so it would be easy for
Right.
parents to fill out. But if they wanted to handwrite or type a form out and say, I want my child to be, called X, or any of these names are fine, and signed it, yes, that would be legally sufficient.
All right, that makes it easy. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're looking for the form. Apparently, we're having some Wi-Fi issues.
It's showing up on his too, but.
Yeah, I know. So while we're waiting for the form to come up, going back to the records, I have just a few clarifications or questions. So the only appeal process, if a parent disagrees with your ruling, Mr. Palmerini, is to put a note into the records, right? Like, there's no other type of appeal process. And now nothing comes before the board unless it's full exclusion. So the board won't get to see or hear any issues unless it's full exclusion.
Yeah, so I want to make sure everybody understands the scope of what I'm doing there. I'm not retrying the discipline case. There is a discipline process for that, right?
Right, this is after the fact.
This is after the fact. I am not, if I ever got a case that says the record was misleading or inaccurate and it was in the middle of a disciplinary process, meaning the DTM was still going on and there was still time to appeal to the hearing officer, to this board, I would say I'm deferring this and putting it in abeyance until such time as your disciplinary process is done. I would never get in the middle of that. Discipline would take precedence over that.
Okay.
So.
And then if it's a discipline record, we can destroy the record after 3 years. Is that correct? That's what I heard. Okay. What happens, so we have this new portal that's coming on board where if it's a level, I think 3 or 4 in certain situations, it's going to get put in the portal, which will go into the Department of Education. So we can destroy the record after 3 years, but it's not being destroyed. It'll still be housed in the Department of Education. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm not sure if they've adopted a change to the records retention schedule to address the portal or not. But yeah, they would have to maintain it in accordance with whatever the records retention schedule would be for the portal. But I suspect they're going to keep it longer than probably we will have it, as part of our records. They being DOE, sorry for the pronoun.
Yes, we have to. So say we have a student that decides at 25 they want to go into the military, and the military comes back and wants access to all CUMES. So they would just get the CUME minus the discipline record because we would have already destroyed the discipline record. Is that accurate?
I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Vaughn, but I think that's accurate.
Because that wasn't my understanding.
Yes, ma'am. The Category B information would have already been destroyed by that point. So what they would get is basically the transcript and the Category A records that reside in our student information system.
And
so the discipline records and the associated documents, supporting documents, would have already been destroyed by that point. Yes, ma'am.
And that would be the same for any type of security clearance that one of our former students would go through with the government.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know that parents realize that a lot of their concerns is, what if my child goes in the military? What if they have a security clearance? This is going to be on their record. It's going to harm them to get a job. I didn't know that the discipline records would be destroyed after 3 years. So I think a lot of parents probably don't have that understanding that that part of it gets destroyed, which I think is helpful because, it's good for parents to know.
I wanted to note there is one exception with the new changes in our retention schedule put forth by the Department of State, and that is for discipline records, student discipline records, sexual harassment, and assault. Those records are kept for 100 anniversary years.
Assaults?
A sexual assault.
Sexual assault. Well, that should be.
So that'll never go away, right?
Correct.
That's the only one that we keep?
That's the only exception. That's brand new.
And that's brand new?
That's brand new.
Okay.
Is sexual battery the same thing?
Member Felder's question was, is sexual battery the same thing as sexual assault?
It says sexual harassment and assault, but if it's a battery, we can be rest assured that it's going to be covered by that rule.
Okay.
By battery, I mean sexual battery, not just a fist fight. I'm sorry. I just want to make it 100% clear.
Okay. All right. We're still waiting for the form. So while we're working on the form, well, I think, Member Castor-Dental, you still want to wait till we come back to the next part, right? Okay, then by all means, Member Castor-Dental.
I have a question about when you say that you destroy the discipline records after 3 years, what that actually constitutes, and if it's at the end of when they are no longer enrolled in our school district, or if it's when they're in second grade and now they're in fifth grade, there's no record of their discipline. Can you clarify?
Absolutely. The way the retention schedule is designed is 3 years after withdrawal, graduation, or
Right.
leaving the school district. So, and once those are done, they're kept at the school for 2 years, and then they're transmitted to the district office, to our district archival center. And at that point, we keep them for an additional year plus the audit year. And at that, we accumulate a list, and anything that has a legal hold, we segregate those, and then we securely destroy them through a vendor.
All right, follow up real quick. The discipline record consists of all of the statements that someone might make, or the investigation and evidence, all of those records are what you're talking about?
All the supporting documents included to the discipline. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we'll come back to you. And Member Gould, you are up next, so.
What happens when a child develops a nickname during school? Like my oldest got called Oreo because he loves
So I think
Oreos.
that goes to the same thing. My son was Nathan, and he sometimes goes by Nate. So I think they would fill out the new form.
Okay, so is that clear? And that came up from his friends at school, and then the teacher started calling him Oreo because everybody else was calling him Oreo at school. And it was just in fun, but I didn't even know it until we were at a football game that he was being called Oreo. I didn't care, but I mean, it wasn't, it was something that happened organically at school because he would have Oreos every single day. And so how do the students know that they need to do that? Is that something the teacher has to catch, and then a parent has to send in a note saying it's okay to call my son Oreo?
So, first of all, we have plugged in the form, and we have now displayed it up on the screen for you all. As we envision this is for, you want me to, okay, I'm scrolling. So that's the guts of the form. The rest of it up top is the students identifying information. So when kids have nicknames for each other, I don't think the purpose of the rule is to police that. I think the purpose of this rule is if you want the teachers and administrators to deviate from your child's legal name, then they would fill out this form, right? So I don't think that the parent has to fill out the form to give kids permission to call your son.
No, but what about the teachers just know they can never use that nickname in front.
That's right. The teachers, under this new rule, the teachers would know that I'm authorized to call the child by the child's legal name or anything this parent has filled out on the form. I wish this rule would have been in place for students. I would have avoided the nickname of Chia when I was in high school, which is ironic given my
Chia?
hairline now. But having,
Chia? As in
I
Chia
would have
Pet?
avoided that, yes. Put water on it
All right, we want
and the hair
pictures of
grows,
that.
and yet not so much anymore.
That's a nice little tidbit of information.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Palmerini.
Yeah, I debated to do it, but I might as well use myself as an example as opposed to my child this time. So, yeah, this form applies to our personnel and what they call the child, not what other students call the child.
So that to me is some of the unintended consequence of really setting culture in a school when laws are so restrictive and in the classroom like this. That's kind of a shame because it was cordial, it was fun, and he kind of felt special when it was being used. So, all right.
Thank you, Member Gould. Real quick, since the form has come up, well, first off, I want to say that some kids are having fun with this. Like there's a kid, I won't name the high school, that their parents asked that they be called Beast Mode. Beast Mode. So their new name is now Beast Mode, which I find hysterical. So on this form, and I know I've talked to Dr. Vasquez about this, would it be possible just to add a line that says, is there anything else you would like us to know about your child? Or is there any other information that would be helpful to us? Can we just add a line to the form that says that?
Matt, I'm going to defer to the superintendent to speak first.
So we have had discussions about that. The problem that we see is that they may put other information there that may not be able to be addressed by the person who gets it, or that it becomes very lengthy like my child has allergies, my child may change transportation from time to time. And so it would be additional work at the school level, because now that we have that information, we have to address it. And so the recommendation from the folks that we have spoken to is to leave as is. If the parent asks or the parent wants to include, for example, because I know I've had conversations where it's particular to the pronoun. If the parent wants to include that on the form, they can, but again, it's up to the teacher or staff to be able to determine whether they will use that pronoun or not.
Thank you. Wait, hang on. But if a child's name is legally changed, then we will use that legal name, correct?
Yes.
If it's changed in the courts, then
Yes.
we will use that name. Okay, well then, honey, you're going to have to turn your mic on.
Just what Dr. Vasquez said about, and your question is, your point is well taken, Board Member Gallo. As a teacher, what I would do, and many teachers do that, the first week of school, I pass out index cards, and I tell them that this is for my personal use. If you would like to put on here any of your allergies or something that you things that you can't do in terms of physical inabilities. And it was personal and private, because a lot of times when you send them all those insurance papers that we do to the first week of school, they don't do that. They don't fill it out. Even if it's on Canvas, they won't do it. But if you just give them a card, but most teachers, they already have all that personal information about the students in their class. Example, I had a kid every day after lunch, she was sleeping. And I found out she was diabetic. So I started eating lunch with her. She would be ordering French fries and potato chips, and that's it. So when I started eating lunch with her, I should have followed my own rule with her. But anyway, I would order food for her, and I'd sit and have lunch with her, because I couldn't understand why she was so tired. And so when I looked back at her card, I realized she was diabetic. So, teachers are doing that. A lot of teachers are doing that. They're looking out for their children.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Felder. Member Byrd?
Thank you. I want to go back to the discipline records and just clarify, because I think I found this out last year. It's any Title IX accusation or like investigation stays like for an extended period of time, correct?
I'd have to look back. Let me look back on that and get information. There are different requirements for Title IX than there are with respect to Florida's general retention schedule, but I don't want to give you wrong information.
Well, and it may have been in reference to the sexual harassment, because I remember talking about a particular case, and I want to, it was a college student was trying to be recruited to play football, and because he had the Title IX investigation on his record that was still in there, and it went with him to college, it affected all of that. And so at the time when we were discussing this, and I don't even remember who I was discussing it with on staff, but I was saying that I think that we need to make sure that we are sharing that information with students. And, we have a lot of kids that think sometimes that comments that are construed, that are inappropriate sexually, that end up with Title IX things, and they say things they think are funny are not funny and can end up staying with them for a very long time and
Title
affect
IX
college.
records is 7 years. We're required to maintain those for 7 years.
7 years? Okay. Yeah, I think, I think in this somewhere, we need to make all of that information a little more clear, because I think that that's something students really need to understand, especially our little adolescent boys that think they're being so funny sometimes and they're really not. So that was my one question. Parents. I was going to ask about the form, the nickname form. How are those forms being inputted when a child brings that form to school? Is it like, who's inputting that information into the system at the schools? Do we know that?
I am not aware, but we'll find out. Typically, in the past, things that were put into Skyward with the field were done by the registrar, but I want to confirm. John.
Okay.
So there is, what we were working towards is, since the form is on Skyward, there is a field that says name, AKA, also known as, and the purpose of doing it on Skyward was to allow that to automatically populate that field. Now, I have to make sure that that's in fact what is happening, but that was the intent of putting it on Skyward, to do that.
Right, and they are working on finalizing it. It is not on Skyward, but the team, I just was informed, the team is working on completing that so that it does then, the parents have access to it through Skyward, and then it self-populates.
That would be much easier, because parents already have to go on Skyward at the beginning of the year to do all those required forms. So it would be a lot easier if that nickname form was right on there.
And Member Byrd, in the interim period, I've gotten that question a few times. I said, make sure you keep the form in the CUME for now until we get that situation, and then inform every adult that this child has to deal with that this is the preferred name or the nickname that the child is authorized to be called. So.
Okay, and then a little quick commentary. So a staff member does not have to use the name that a parent puts on the form for the preferred name, according to this new rule. And I just find it ironic that our state is boasting parent rights, yet not all parents have rights. That was just my little commentary on that. It's very disturbing to me that a parent could go to a school and say, I can't even talk about it, it makes me so upset. Could go to the school and say, this is what my child is going through, this is who my child is, this is their name. And then a staff member can just say, well, I'm not comfortable with that, so I'm not using that. So anyway, sorry, just had to get that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd, and I 100% agree with you. You're still waiting on the data, correct, Karen? Member Farrant, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am definitely in agreement with a lot of the different changes. I think everybody's brought up great points. I did want to just discuss the legal name. I think just making sure that teachers understand that if a child comes to them and says, I would like to be called by a different name, and they don't have that form, that teachers can reach out to the parent and say, hey, your child wanted to be called by this. Do you mind filling out that form or sending a note in? It's a really quick, easy thing to do. Also, how are teachers being notified if there is a name change? Or if that name is maybe a new legal name? Is there a way that teachers are being notified of that? I don't know. Is that Dr. Vasquez?
No, I can answer it. So if the name is changed legally, we'll get the order, and then what we will do is we'll update Skyward to reflect that the name change has been completed. That will notify our teachers automatically, because they'll see a change in the records that they deal with that says, okay, this child's gone from Robert to Robbie, or whatever the name change is. So from that standpoint, once the legal change is made in Skyward, it automatically updates the records. Until we automate fully this form that we have, like I said, what we've advised is for when the administrator gets a copy of this form, they ensure that every teacher that touches that child. In elementary, that's going to be your classroom teacher, maybe a special ed teacher, and the specials teachers would be notified that this child's preferred name is X, whatever it is. And once this gets automated fully, that name, AKA field, will be automatically populated with the parent's preferred nickname or whatever it is, and they'll be informed that way.
Perfect. And then also just a thought, when their parents are filling out the forms, seems like there's always so many forms in the beginning of the year, but you're filling out their name and address and all those type of things, who the legal guardians are. In that, they're also, and this has always been, there's a place that says preferred name. This has been since my kids have been in the district for however long, 11 years. And even then, I have one of my kids goes by their first and middle, and I would put first and middle in that preferred box, and some teachers called him by that and some didn't. So I think it is what it is. But I think we need to just make sure that okay. Also, just my own commentary. I have a friend whose daughter was attending school, and the mom was aware that the daughter was having gender confusion and notified the school that they were not going to go ahead with any kind of, they were not going to affirm the confusion that the child was going through. And just loving on this girl and caring for her the same way that they always had. And a teacher decided and took it upon herself to change that child's name and began calling her by a boy's name. And the parent had no idea, and when the parent realized, it was because the daughter was suicidal, and that's when she went to the school. That is why this rule is in place, and I think it's to make sure and protect children, just make sure that there is that communication between parent and the school. And I think we can always use communication and discuss. And if a parent is having trouble, maybe there is a teacher who isn't comfortable, maybe there's a way to change their class or to discuss and have a discussion where a parent can go to that teacher and discuss with them. And I think communication goes a long way.
That happened in Leon County, I believe, not in Orange County. I just want to make that very clear. And they could have solved that in Leon County without creating an entire rule for the entire state of Florida. That's just my opinion. Mrs. Member Felder.
Thank you, Chair Gallo. I just have just a quick concern, and you probably have already addressed it, but this keeps coming back in my mind. You have a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, and they touch another 4 or 5-year-old in an inappropriate way, genitalia, all right? And we have to follow the appropriate procedure in terms of how we deal with that child. So they're 5 or they're 4. So they may remember or they may not. So when they turn 16 to 17, is that still following them? And let me just say how I feel about that. And you can tell me about the rule again. I have concern that if such a thing follows, I had a situation at one of the schools I taught at. This kid, they were in a art class and they were making pottery. And this student stood behind another student and mimicked a sexual gyration. They put it on Facebook or Snapchat, whatever that thing is. And so the child was extremely embarrassed. And the father came out and we had the district suspended the kid or whatever. But he was 16. And they labeled him as a sexual predator. So now he's about 25 now. That label, it was wrong and it was fully embarrassing to the child. But I just need you to talk me through this. And the kid was a pistol, but I mean, he was my student. And I just felt like what happened to him, he was labeled as a sexual predator. So I just got an issue with that. I'm not trying to change you. I just want you to understand, as a teacher, how I felt. Yeah, that was wrong. Should have been dealt with. But to have that label follow him, I don't know what to do with that. I have a problem with that. Thank you.
So this falls into the category of when the legislature passes rules and when the Department of State passes rules, because they have our records retention schedule. And unfortunately, it could have negative consequences for a child. And it seems like labeling a child like that would have negative consequences. Now, I think the countervailing thought is, I think they want to, they being the folks who had this records retention schedule, to ensure that a kid who is a predator is not turned out into the general public without folks having knowledge about that child's acts. I think there is a difference between a 17-year-old who does those kinds of acts and a 5- and 6-year-old who does those kinds of acts. Most of the time with 5- and 6-year-olds, they have no mental understanding of what they're doing when it comes to that. But a 17-year-old would. And so, unfortunately, I think if we make a finding of sexual assault or harassment under this rule, that the unintended consequence is, if it's a 5- and 6-year-old who we make that finding on, we're going to have to keep that record for 100 years. And I think there should be some sort of differentiation taken into account the student's age. But unless and until the Department of State passes a different rule and changes that up, we are going to have to maintain those records for 100 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pomerini. Thank you, Member Felder. All right, I believe we are ready to move on.
All right, so I think this is the section that Member Castrodeno wants to talk about. So in accordance with FERPA, your current policy says that we have the notification section, but the current policy defines directory information to include name, address, telephone number if listed, participation in officially recognized activities and sports, weight and height if an athletic team member, name of the most recent previous school or program attended, dates of attendance at schools in the district, diplomas, certificates, and honors received, date of graduation, and date of place of birth. And information described in subsections 1A, which is your name, D, which is the participation in sports and activities, E, which is your weight and height if athletic team member, F, which is the name of most recent school or program attended, and G, which is the dates of attendance. Those are published routinely by the board in conjunction with press releases, so usually related to sports or maybe theater or some other kind of thing about school activities, honor roll achievements, athletic events, and other school-related activities. So that's where those are in there. Directory information may be released without the consent of the student or the student's parent, legal guardian to persons or organizations defined in Section 1002.22. That is our other partnering agencies. Most of them we have an agreement with respect to data sharing. And directory information shall not be published when a student's parent, legal guardian submits written notification to the principal within 10 days of distribution of the Code of Student Conduct. Failure on the part of the parent, legal guardian to advise the student's principal within the time frame indicated shall be deemed a waiver of any right to preclude release of such directory information pursuant to the Florida statutes or federal laws. And then we have a provision here, we're changing the statutory reference. There are certain names and directory information pertaining to children of law enforcement officers or investigative personnel of DCF, firefighters, justices. Those are not necessarily automatically released unless the parent says it's okay. So I think we're coming back now to what directory information is, and I think I'll just let you all discuss, and I think Member Castrodeno is probably the first one that wants to discuss that.
Madam
yes,
Chair,
Mr.
before-
Pomeroy.
so I just wanted to remind you all of an example that we have. So say a charter school comes to us and says, we want the directory information for all of your students. Remember, we have to come back to you all, and you all have to authorize the release of that directory information. So that is that with any outside commercial entity, before we release directory information, your policy requires a vote on that. So I just wanted to throw that out there too. It is not, if a commercial entity outside of this district wants that directory information, unless it is something like, you know, a group we contact, the group that we do class rings for, the groups that we do photographs for, that would be within a contract about saying, okay, you can contact students in order to let them know you're providing that kind of service, and that would be in a contractual relationship we have. But
That
if it's,
doesn't come before the board, Mr. Pomeroy.
don't know if those contracts specifically do or not. But we have contractual relationships with outside groups that do that stuff. But other than that, if it is a commercial entity, you all will vote on it, so.
Thank you. Member Castrodento?
Yes, thank you for bringing this up. I have a couple different concerns about the directory information. One is that currently parents have to opt out of the directory information if they don't want it shared. And I don't really believe that parents fully understand what directory information is and how it's used, and I don't think that consent by default, by not signing anything, is actually a true consent. And I would also like to look at the individual elements of each, those A through J pieces of information that we have, and reduce those. I'll go into a little more detail. But also, I want to clarify what constitutes, I guess, the directory information use and what it doesn't. I know that there is some confusion when schools want to put out a program for a play. They sometimes have asked, are we allowed to share this information? And this, I want to make sure that we know the difference, that it's not, we're not restricting information that is produced by the school district necessarily, but we're restricting it based on outside entities that can collect this information. And I hope we can kind of strike a balance between the ability to share information about our students and also protect their personal privacy as well. Should I go ahead and list the concerns? When it comes to the different elements, I would think that the contact information of the students, their name or the address and telephone number and email, is not included in those. I don't think that's necessary to share with anyone else outside of our district. And I'm not sure that the date and place of birth is necessary, and I think that actually could be used against them. So those are like my first level of information that I would like to remove from the directory information. The next ones are, like my category B or level B would be the name of the most recent school or program attended, and the dates of attendance at the school, and dates of graduation. I just wonder if that information could also be used to kind of develop a profile of students and their age, when that information is used in conjunction with other information that's already out there digitally. And there are some areas that I think we could still allow, which would be maybe the students' names, diplomas, certificates, or honors. And then I'm still would like to discuss more about students' participation in recognized activities in sports. I know students who are involved in different teams and sports frequently have their matches and their information broadcast on TV and in the newspaper. And I think that's a part of being an athlete for public school, but I'm not sure about some of the other activities, if that should be accessible to all. I don't know if club membership should be allowed. I just find that could be detrimental to some students. So I can see the need to be able to share some information, but I want to also protect students' information as much as possible. And when it comes to like things that I'm not trying to restrict would be like the use of a student's name on a school marquee, like if they're an award winner or spelling bee winner and they want to celebrate. I don't think that that's necessarily something that we have to restrict. And of course, law enforcement would have access to a lot of this information as well. And then I had a question also about a public records request, if that falls under the same directory information, if someone could request any of this information regarding a student, or if any of that is, or all of it is automatically redacted. So those are just some of my concerns. Also, Mr. Palmerini mentioned the example of allowing like a school board or yearbook or class rings and those kind of companies that do business with our seniors. I'm not sure that giving the companies all that information about how to contact kids is necessary. There are other ways, I think, that we can allow those companies to still serve those objectives without giving away our information. We could have them advertise in their school emails. I know that the yearbook classes, they set up tables and promote it. They can send out flyers. There are other ways that we can give information to the families where they can reach out individually. We're not giving them all that information. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Member Castor-Dental. Mr. Palmerini? Or Ms. Enval? Would one of you like to respond to her questions?
So with respect to public records requests, if it is student identifiable data, that is being redacted out of those records. We do not provide that in response to a public records request. So the rule with respect to directory information is, and it's 34 CFR 99.37, it says the agency may disclose directory information. It's not, I just want to give the parameters here. It's not a shall. So if the board wanted to say, we would never disclose directory information, we're choosing not to disclose it, that is an option, right? However, it does do some things where it comes into like sports participation, football programs, you know. Billy Bob, the offensive lineman, is 6'3" in 11th grade, weighs 270 pounds. That's the normal standard type of information that we would put out in a program. And if we didn't to allow disclosure of directory information, we wouldn't be able to do that because that would require parental permission. Because remember, directory information is information that we can disclose without parental permission under the rule, as long as we give the parents, and by the way, the regulations are very clear, an opt-out, not an opt-in to disclose it. You have to give them an opt-out. So it's presumptively able to be disclosed if the agency chooses to disclose it, and the parent has the right to opt out, but we can't reverse it and do it the other way. So I'm going to look here at the other list. So class rings, yearbooks, senior regalia. The only other thing is, with respect to class rings, yearbooks, and that kind of thing, sometimes parents may not get that information may not make it home. Like, say, we could put in an advertisement, we could have it be passively distributed where a kid can come and pick it up. Not all kids are going to come pick it up, and a parent may not have that information about how to purchase these things if that information doesn't make it from the student all the way home. So I think that's a lot of times why we allow entities to have the addresses that do those types of services, so they can ensure the parents get it and choose to either partake in those services or not. So I hope I answered all of it. If I missed it, please tell me what I missed, and I'll be happy to address.
Member Kester-Denton?
Thank you for that. I don't know if your response is fully addressing all the different elements that I mentioned, like the request to restrict other information, contact information, and...
So I'm looking at the regulation. This is 34 CFR 99.3. It says directory information includes but is not limited to student name, address, telephone listing, electronic mail address, photograph, date and place of birth, major fields of study, grade level, enrollment status, undergraduate, graduate, part-time, full-time, dates of attendance, participation in officially recognized activities and sports, weight and height, members of athletic teams, degrees, honors, and awards received, and the most recent educational agency or institution attended. So it says directory information includes but is not limited to. So that means everything in that list is presumptively directory information under the regulation, and you could add more. And then if you go to 99.37, it says an education agency or institution may disclose directory information if it is given, and it says may disclose, if it has given public notice to parents and students in attendance of the in attendance and eligible students in attendance at the agency, the types of personally identifiable information that the agency has designated as directory information. So you all have authority to designate certain classes of directory information if you so choose. So
Okay.
I think...
So we can restrict it.
Yeah, so it lists what is presumptively directory information. If like somebody were to sue us and say, you can't release a name and address, and we continue to release a name and address as directory information, if they sued us, we could point to the regulation and say, that is presumptively directory information, and we're not violating the law if we release it under that area. You all may then turn around and say, but you know what? We're choosing as an agency, as an entity, not to release names, addresses, telephone numbers, dates and place of birth. So that is a choice you all have the authority to make.
Okay, follow up?
Yes.
I don't believe it's our information to give. And I'd like to err on the side of student privacy and student rights. So I think it's fair to not release their address and their phone number and email. There's so much information that's already out there. It can be misused, it can be abused, and I think protecting students' information is a responsibility that we have, even if FERPA allows us to share it, and we assume that parents are giving us consent. I don't think that they truly understand, and we truly give them an option to really opt out. So I still would like to see some restrictions. I'd like to hear what my fellow board members think. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Castor-Dental. I'm actually queued in next, and I have some questions. So on this list, we have A through J. Could we only have, like, could we limit it to just 3 items? Are we allowed to? So we are allowed to restrict it. So we are allowed to basically build this list or not build this list as we choose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So my next question would be, so unintended consequences. Like, for example, I was just talking to Dr. Vasquez with the AmeriCorps are coming in and they're tutoring our pre-K students for free, and they need access to like just information when they're on campus. They're not taking it home with them, just on campus so that they could do their job in the tutoring. These programs are vital to our students because they help them make sure they stay with their cohort, that they're learning, that they're proficient in reading. What unintended consequences would it have for a program like that if we were to alter this, if any?
So usually our agreements with AmeriCorps and some other, I'm trying to think of other groups that come in to provide services with our students. We have a specific agreement with them, and we usually require them to get a specific, sometimes they want attendance records and those kind of things to monitor. We require them to get parental consent to participate in those particular activities. So that's additional on above and beyond this directory information.
But those agreements wouldn't come before the board for us to approve the release of those records, right? Because you're getting parental consent.
Right.
Like, there would be no reason for those policies to need any type of board approval.
No, so so you might have 10 kids that participate in the AmeriCorps. I mean, you have more than that. And if only 5 get parental consent, those consent forms filled out, only those, the district only provides that information for those 5 students that have parental consent.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, when we look at things like this, if we look to restrict it, or if we look, because I agree with everything going on right now, the less information that we allow out in the public, I think is better for our students, because this could get into the hands of somebody who could harm a child. But I also recognize that there's also sometimes unintended consequences, and I'd like to know what those unintended consequences might be, if we have any idea that we haven't thought of if we do this, or what solution there might be to those. For example, you're not going to have a football mom not be, all football moms, they do the little cards. The baseball, they have the baseball cards. Weightlifting, you have the little cards. They do posters that are all over the football field, and it has their number, their name, if you're weightlifting, your weight, your class, your RBI or whatever if you're a baseball player. So I just want to make sure that we wouldn't make it more difficult on those parents. And maybe it would be by just the coach going, here, I need you to sign this. I don't know. I'm curious. Dr. Vasquez.
So we do currently have agreements in place, and I'll speak to our agreement with Paramore, our agreement with Travel and Leisure, where what we're getting does require us to release that information to them. It's not all of this, but it is, some of that is directory information. So it will have an impact on some of the programs that we have. And yes, we can ask the parents to opt in, but as we have seen with our, just our medical forms, it's very difficult. And so for many of these partnerships that we have that provide, let's say, scholarships, they are wanting for us to be able to share the data with them. And they use that for research, and they use that to continue to get funders that benefit our kids.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. So I guess it's in those areas we don't want. I'm in agreement that we should limit this and provide as little as possible, but I don't want to do anything that would cause a student to get a scholarship that they otherwise might get, or cost money, or do anything like that. That's my personal opinion. But we have more people up to speak. So Member Frank.
Madam Chair, before
Oh,
Member
yes.
Farrar.
I'm sorry, Mr. Palmerini.
Just wanted to make, there is an exception in the law. It's called the Solomon Amendment, which allows the military, notwithstanding FERPA, if they request for us to get name, address, electronic mail addresses, and telephone numbers, we have to provide it, notwithstanding what FERPA says. So I just wanted to make sure we had that
The
exception there as well.
military has access to everything.
Yeah.
Yes, and that information is all on your, I know you can't see this, but your Code of Student Conduct, we have one page for parents about notification of their FERPA rights, and then the other page specifically sets forth what is directory information, talks about the military recruiters, and it specifically says directory information, which is information that is generally not considered harmful or an invasion of privacy if released, can be also be disclosed to outside organizations without a parent's guardian's prior written consent. So it has that information in there, but if you were to limit this, then we would also change that in the code.
Okay, thank you. Member Frank?
Thank you. I definitely agree with the making sure that parents are well notified. The 10 days to opt out. What happens if a parent comes 2 months in and decides that they don't want their child's information? What would happen then?
We would absolutely tell the school to honor that request and to no longer release it. Now, if we release directory information in months 1 and 2 before the parent came to us, nothing we can do about that.
Right.
But subsequent to that, we would say absolutely honor the don't release directory information request.
Okay, so the wording here is just saying that after the 10 days, it could be shared. Can we put something in there that says unless a parent, or it could be shared if you decide after 10 days you want to have your child's information redacted or not shared, you would need to do so in writing or something like that, just so parents know that it isn't just 10 days and done. Because it does seem like it's always when you look back and you go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I only had 10 days. And that beginning of school, most parents are, they have like a fire hose in their face anyways, trying to figure it all out. And then also just with the different things being notified, all the A through J, I can see all the different sides where you do want to protect. But as you stated earlier, is that then if we were to share this with this information with outside entities, it would come before the board.
Yes.
Prior to doing so. So I think when it comes before the board, we look at it and we see, okay, is this something that we need? If it were to come before the board and we see, okay, these people don't necessarily need an address, a telephone number, or contact information, a weight, or things like that, can we redact it then?
So when it comes before you all can say, I would assume that the agenda item would say, we're going to release directory information in accordance with what the school board's policy is, JRA is. So at that point, you all can say, no, we're not going to allow the release and vote to do it. Or you could say, we're going to allow the release of this, and this, but not that, and that. Now, the one thing I will caution you is, if for one entity you release this, and this, and for another entity you don't release this, and this, then that could be problematic as far as treating different entities differently, and it could give rise to some actions that could be filed against us. But yes, you all can have the discretion to say when it comes before you, we're not voting to release all the directory information to this entity. I mean, unless we're required to do it by law, like with the military. And you could say, we're voting not to do it, because again, we may disclose directory information. We do not, it's not you shall disclose directory information, which is a requirement. So it would be something that, when we get there, we would probably go over this again when you all would have questions. Yes, you can limit which directory information you're going to provide in this instance. However, going forward, if we get other similar requesters, we should release the exact same information you all vote to release tonight.
Okay, with that being said, is there a way then that we could put in the policy, if it is school-related, such as getting a grant or some sort of scholarship, something for higher education, that this information would be given, like any of the information that's here that would be necessary. But if it's somebody just wanting, I don't even know an example, but an organization that would be wanting the information of our children, but it isn't related to any kind of grant, that we could have it like separate, where if that's the case, if it isn't for a scholarship or something that would benefit the child, then only the name and whatever information we decide. I don't know if that's something that we could do, just to have it on paper.
So we could craft the policy language that reflects that. I don't think we're going to be able to think this through and wordsmith it right now. We would have to go back and look at some language and craft it. But yeah, we can do that. It says, if it's something that's going to benefit the child as far as financial aid with an institution of higher learning, we'll release this type of information, and absent that, we will not. We can craft language like that.
And then just one last thing, I wonder, are we able to maybe make it a little clearer to parents so that they understand exactly, I think somebody else mentioned this already, but make it very clear what exactly directory information is? And maybe even that could be something where parents can, well, that might be too much opting in and out, but where parents could say, I'm fine with their name and this and that, but not all this other stuff. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, your language in your Code of Student Conduct right now mirrors, there's bullets in there, and I know you can't see that, but it mirrors what you have listed as directory information already there. And we know, the reason why we put in the Code of Student Conduct and made it its own separate section is we know for sure that the Code of Student Conduct goes to every single student at the beginning of every year. So we know this is a publication they always get, as opposed to some districts have it just on their website or whatever. So we wanted to make sure that they got it, but we could amend this page to match what is in your new revised code or policy once we figure out what that is.
Thank you, Member Front. Just so that we're clear, contracts that the district sign that give this data to those entities do not come before the board. Or do they? Contracts would, but like for scholarships would, like that scholarships, that type of information, because I was under the impression that not everything comes before the board.
No, there are certain contracts that are below the threshold amount, and the superintendent wants to speak, so Vivian's here.
The contracts related to student records and data and how we release student directory information.
Basically, the agreements that come through legal and procurement, if there is a data request associated with it, we review it. We push back on personally identifiable information that's requested, because most of the time it's being requested in a very summary fashion, saying that they're a school official and therefore they're entitled to receive the data as part of administering the program. Most of the time, when you delve deeply, you can accommodate the vendor's needs by not providing them PII. Aggregate data will cut it. So if it is de-identified data and that document does not have to come to the board for another reason, it's a multi-year agreement, it's in excess of $50,000, we do not bring those agreements to the board. It is only if there is specific student data that is being requested that we're told is inherent to the program that requires board approval.
And it's over a certain threshold, correct?
No.
No?
No. Even if it is
okay.
a voluntary program, if they are coming along and they're saying, we need student names, we need whether English is their first language, we need socioeconomic data, things of that nature in order to implement a program, and they say it's inherent to their program, then we have either two routes. We can either get parental consent or we can get you all to approve it under the theory that they are a school official. And sometimes they're a school official, sometimes they're not. The consents have a problem because there is an administrative issue associated with the consent. Historically, you do not get full classroom participation if you need a parent to opt in versus opting out. And then you run into the problem of what if you get a parent who says, I want my child to participate in the program, but I don't want to share the data. So if the vendor is telling you the only way we can provide tutoring services is if we get consent, then now you have a student in the classroom who is not getting the same services as other students who might benefit from the tutoring program. So we do try to reach a compromise with the vendors, and most of the time they understand that they can get where they need to go without PII, but sometimes they insist on it as inherent to their program.
Okay, thank you.
Right, sorry.
Yeah. She answered it. Member Salamanca.
Would it be possible for the board to get access to our most commonly requested information by vendor type? Like are most of these FERPA requests by educational institutions, or are some of these I just want to get a sense of if we get more restrictive here, who are the higher percentage of FERPA requests from?
I will tell you, most of the time, the agreements that come through procurement, that let's say are software type agreements, the vendors are only asking for student name, student ID, in order for the student to gain access to the program that we're purchasing. So those are not really high-risk type agreements. A lot of the agreements come through the research department because there is a research component associated with what a vendor might be doing, or a vendor may be providing us a survey, but there is a research component to it. I can certainly work with research so you can see some of the types of requests that we get. But in my experience, research is very effective at getting an understanding of why the data is being requested and saying, we can give you de-identified data, or we'll give you all these data elements minus the student's name, and we'll give you a dummy number that we have created. So you have everything that you want regarding that student other than,
just anonymized.
Other than that
No, I get
student's
that.
name.
Yeah, I think my concern here is I don't want to have unintended consequences where folks who use this data to provide services or scholarships or anything for students no longer have access to it. And so, but I don't think I have a clear sense of where the concentration of some of these FERPA requests are from.
Would it be helpful on the agreements that need to come to the board if, as part of the resolution, there is a data component section which says, here's the reason why we're asking for approval of this agreement. As part of this agreement, the following student data is going to be shared, and the basis for sharing it. Because it might not necessarily be obvious when you all are getting a line item on the agenda as to why we would be sharing.
Yes, I think that would be
PII.
helpful. Yeah, because the existing list we have up here, what was, do we have the reasoning behind why something like weight and height is on there?
So the health department?
No, go ahead, good.
Health department. And we have been intentional in limiting the number of research that we are approving, limiting the number of new programs that we are bringing in to the district. Last year and the year before, we were having conversations with the Department of Health because they want access to some of our data, and based on what we're currently doing, we're not able to provide it because they were trying to help us with the vaccinations and getting more of the families to be aware and come in. So I believe that we need to take a close look at what type of data we are releasing, especially with the impact that AI is having, both good and bad, but for some of our kids that may not be aware, they can be targets. I do believe there's a way to allow for a process, and I love the idea of including in the resolution what data we are releasing as part of this agreement, so that the board can then, if there are concerns, we can address them, or we can end up not moving forward with the agreement. But I can tell you that we have been very intentional in limiting the release of student data over the last 3 years.
I guess it would be helpful to have some staff guidance on this list and what are some of those that are helpful to have access to versus not. Like, I think there's probably a reason why each of these are on there. I don't think I can fully appreciate the why or the how of most of these, and it would be really helpful to get an understanding of why the current list is what it is. If staff feels like this is too much, not enough, or there's areas where there's some friction points where we think we're, not getting information of folks who want to help us on education, scholarships, whatever.
So typically, a lot of the commercial vendor agreements are surrounding caps and gowns, photos, student photos, things like that, where the services are going to be provided en masse throughout the district. And therefore, we share the type of basic information that's included in that FERPA disclosure in order to give the vendor access and to send it out. We've also had local universities and colleges request that information for, let's say, 11th graders or 12th graders who are graduating, and they want to reach out to those graduates. The compromise that we've typically reached is that we do not provide the data to them. We then share the data with, let's say, a third-party mailing type entity, and then that entity sends out whatever the university or the college wants to send to 12th graders who are graduating that may need help navigating with, college prep.
Okay, thank you.
But I would be happy to work with you, Member Salamanca, and kind of give you a sense of some of the requests that we get and how we navigate through them.
Thank you, Member Salamanca. Okay, you're good. I know, I see you. Member Dr. Castro-Dental.
So that, what you just mentioned raised a question for me about those tutoring services. If they're not directly asking the district for that information, are they getting it from someone else that we've given that information to? So if we are sharing that information about 11th graders for our colleges that are requesting that,
Right.
Does the mail house use that and sell it to a tutoring company?
We typically will only give it to a mail house that we have an agreement with, and that mail house generally will agree to maintain confidentiality consistent with the IT standards that I've been given to safeguard the information, and that it's not supposed to be sold. It's only for that intended use. And that's how we try to sort of navigate accommodating our community partners that really want to try to do something for our students without handing them a list of 12th graders who are going to graduate and not really knowing what they're going to use that list for once we give it to them.
Okay. I know that when I've had students in high school, we get lots of marketing for them. And I wonder, where does it originate? I know it could be anywhere, right? It could be,
Right.
There's lots of information out there.
Right.
And ultimately, my concern is, how are we protecting our students' information now so that they're not fully swallowed up by all that's out there in the digital world and have their whole profiles established by the time they graduate, so that they are targets of marketing and commercialization and everything else. So I know that there are legit companies that serve a purpose, but I worry about having just access, giving access, when we aren't sure what happens to that data. I mean, there could be a breach. There could be
Absolutely.
an unintended breach. There could be, someone could be a bad apple. So that has negative consequences.
The services that we pay for as a district have standard provisions in the agreements, which basically say that the vendor is only to use the data for the service provided. So let's say it's a math program to assist students who may need a little help in math. It's not meant for third-party use. They attest in the contract that they're not selling it to anyone, and they're only using it to administer the services. We then ask the question of, well, what data are you collecting? We realize that you're only going to use it for the intended purpose, but what are you collecting? The vast majority of the time, they are collecting the student's name, the student's email, password, and then if the student is taking sample tests or sample lessons on that platform, they are retaining that information, but contractually they are saying that they are not selling it to anyone. If there is a data breach, they are agreeing to comply with the Florida data breach process, which would require them to alert us that there has been a breach within a reasonable time of them discovering it. There are a lot of free platforms out there that we can't control what students access. I know the departments vet programs that we use, and in each category we have multiple ones, so if an issue arises with one, we can pivot students for another program. But I don't have a means of controlling the free platforms other than if we really are concerned about a platform to maybe get a message to parents that we don't necessarily recommend a particular platform.
Quick follow-up? Yes. I mentioned, how do we know that these companies don't turn around and sell the information, but they could also, like my insurance company, say, well, we can use it for all of our other entities that are in our umbrella. Mm-hmm. Do we also restrict that extended use if it's?
We restrict it to the extent that their controlled companies need to use it for the delivery of the services. So if we sign an agreement with a vendor and the vendor tells us that they have a subsidiary company that does a certain portion of the curriculum service, we have to give that entity access to it. But that entity agrees to all the terms that are negotiated in the document.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Member Castrodento. Are you good, Member Front? Okay, perfect. Member Gould?
So I absolutely agree that we need to always make sure that we're documenting what the expectation is with our vendors. I do want to make sure that in fear of the minority, because let's face it, every time those kids are off campus and they use TikTok, there's a lot of data being captured. Every time they Google, there's a lot of data being captured. They don't use Facebook, but you get the gist of all those social media platforms. So it won't be. I think our utilization is minimal compared to all those other things they freely partake in building their profile. And I only say that because I want to make sure. We desperately need our partners to help us lift our students' knowledge and provide mentorships within our schools. And I want to make sure that, programs like Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA and our faith-based partners and all pro dads, and I mean, I could go on and on with that list of much needed partners that we're getting. We want them to scale, not to retract because of worrying about the one situation. And we know how painful that is when legislation is made based on single inappropriate uses of things. So I think we want to make sure that our partners are vetted. We want to make sure those MOUs are in place so that we have recourse if we need to, but not stifle involvement with us in partnerships with our key community advocates. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Gould. And I agree with Member Gould. And I know that we are strict with the data that we give, because I had to get involved with the AmeriCorps because we were trying to get them in the school tomorrow, and they wanted information we didn't believe that they should have. And I know that we've worked it out. So I can first, because sometimes as a board member, I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, we're trying to get volunteers in our classrooms that can help our kids, and they just want to help our kids, and they're struggling because we are so sensitive to the data that we release. So I can say firsthand that we are good stewards of this information, and we don't release it willy-nilly, for the lack of a better term. So I think, do you all have guidance? I know that there's going to be some language revisions. Do you guys have the guidance that you needed to move forward, to move this policy forward? Is there anything else that you need from the board before we move on?
No, I think we'll bring back a proposed red line again in a work session.
A proposed red line? Perfect. Is there anything else before we move on, board, that you would like to discuss with this topic?
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, Mr. Palmery.
I just wanted to make sure, this is going back to the names discussion we had earlier, and I just want to make sure it was clear for the record. So in the memorandum we put out with regard to this, and this is once again where I use my son, so I apologize to him in advance. If the legal name is Robert and the parent fills out a form saying, I want my child to be called Roberta, we would call the child Roberta, but our teachers would not be required to utilize the she pronoun if Roberta is actually born a biological male. I just wanted to make sure that was clear for everybody, because I just wanted to.
Thank you, Mr. Palmery, because there was discussion at the board, and we were several of us were under the impression that if Robert wanted to go by Roberta and a teacher didn't feel comfortable calling Robert Roberta, that they didn't have to. So what you're telling us is, if a parent says, my child's name is Roberta, we will use the child's name as Roberta. The teacher, if uncomfortable, just does not have to use pronouns if pronouns are requested.
So I'm going to go ahead, and I have the memorandum here. I just want to read it just to make sure everybody is clear. With respect to our transgender students, a parent may fill out the form allowing for the usage of a transgender name. As an example, if the student's legal name is Robert, but the student identifies as a transgender girl and uses the name Roberta, the parent may authorize a teacher or other personnel to call the student Roberta. However, while the teacher and other personnel would utilize the name Roberta when requested by the parent, under the recently adopted House Bill 1069, a teacher or other personnel may elect not to utilize the pronoun she/her when referring to Roberta.
I have one question. I know. What if so they would also be considered a pronoun? Like if a parent refer to my child as they or y'all, or what if they just said refer to my child as their last name Gallo and don't use any pronouns at all?
They could do that.
So they could say refer to my child as Roberta. I don't want you using any pronouns with my child.
Yeah, they could do that.
And that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
The guidance that we've given, I've had questions that have been asked from various administrators when they're concerned about the usage of pronouns. I've said, if the parent says the child's name is Roberta, just use Roberta. And the whole pronoun thing can be avoided. Just use the name that the parent has designated for the child. That is the easiest way to do it. It does two things. It respects the House Bill 1069 with regard to pronouns. It also respects the parent's right to designate what they want their child to be called under the rule.
And we've notified our teachers and our administrators that guidance.
Oh, yeah, that guidance was
shared.
published to everybody before the school year.
That makes me feel, does it make you feel better, Member Byrd? Okay. Thank you for sharing with us, because there was some confusion up here, and we weren't clear on what, so thank you, we really appreciate that. All right, so we are now, Dr. Vasquez, back to you, we are moving on.
Our last order of business for today is around our social media and request by board members to look at a social media policy. Today, the purpose is to begin the conversations so that staff may have direction to draft a policy and then bring that to the board as part of a work session. So I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Enval and Mr. Palmerini.
So we've talked about social media for a while now, and you all received, I think we had a planning session back in May. I provided you a nice long documentation about social media. At OCPS, the district does not run or control school board members' social media pages. It is all left up to you, where no district resources are expended. You all each have your own First Amendment right to free speech, and you maintain your own social media accounts. I think right now, if we were, first, I guess I would need to see what you all are looking to do. I would make sure that we would not want to run afoul of any First Amendment rights when it comes to a social media policy, but maybe you want to have some guidelines or things that you're going to agree upon, or I will just let you all kind of discuss what you want.
Thank you. Mrs. Enval, so I actually did queue up first. So here's my thought process on the social media. I know that at one time we had discussed having each board member place a disclaimer on their social media that basically says our viewpoints are our personal viewpoints and are in no way, shape, or form reflective of OCPS or any policies within OCPS. I would support that disclaimer. I am not interested in having anybody control my social media. I feel that that's a burden that does not need to be placed on our communications department. They have enough that they're trying to do as is, and they're doing a fabulous job. That little car karaoke was quite cute, wasn't it? I was teasing Scott about that yesterday. Like, it was cute. It was great. I think people enjoyed it. I think that is the stuff that they need to focus on. And put out into the community. I think anything that as board members we choose to put on our social media, that's on us. And if people like or don't like what we publish, they can inform us of that. If we continue to do it and they continue not to like it, they can vote us out at the next election. That's their option as well. So I would say I'm fine with the disclaimer. Past that, I don't think there's anything we could do, and I'm not interested in having a policy that is unenforceable just for the sake of having a policy. It's kind of my personal opinion, but I would love to hear from the rest of my board members. And so next up is Member Salamanca.
Thank you, Chair. I am also in a very similar page to Member Gallo. I would be supportive of having something saying we highly recommend that we make it clear to everyone who goes on our social media that views are our own, and when we are also kind of amplifying the district's and our position on any given point. But we are elected officials, and people elected us because they agree or like us and our views. And I find it very difficult when it comes to a First Amendment for the district to, one, tell me what to say or how to say it, or two, to control my social media. I also do not personally want the district or the government controlling my social media. And I do believe that voters have a way to check this through the voting booth. But I would definitely be supportive of having a strongly recommendation, just because I do think it can create confusion for folks because they don't understand what is a candidate's or like an elected official's page versus the district's page. And so if there is language that we can put on our pages that says, views are my own for district, obviously views or policies, please go here. I am more than happy to add that to my social media. And yeah, I think those are the main points that I would have.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Salamanca. Member Dr. Castor-Dental, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I currently use my own Facebook page for personal thoughts and opinions, and it doesn't say that, other than in the information about me, that I'm on the school board. And I know that there are constituents who, when they see a Facebook page that says school board in it, in the title, they believe it is an official representation of the school district. So I'm not trying to ask anyone to change what they say or alter what they post. I just think for the public's sake, it's important to clarify, because there is concern. I've had to field questions like, is this what the district is doing and saying? And I have to say no. And they'll say they saw it on another member's page, and I have to say that's their own page. So there's just a moment, a reason to clarify. Another concern I have is the use of student photos on those Facebook pages. I just don't know if it's a good practice to include students of schools where we visit, at least their faces, anything that's identifiable. And I don't know if the student photo release form is supposed to cover that use on a personal Facebook page. So those are some of the things I just want to discuss and help clarify. And the same with our official email that we use. Does that photo release also cover those uses of students in those as well? So those are my concerns.
Thank you. Member Castor-Dental, so would anybody like to answer Member Castor-Dental's questions?
I think John's pulling up the media release.
Yes.
I believe it applies only to official school board publications, like our official OCPS site. I do not believe it applies to social media
Vivian's back.
pages.
Yeah.
I know for myself personally, if I post a picture at a school, I try to do the back of the kids' heads so it's blurred. The only time I ever post, and that's just because I'm scared that there won't be a release, the only time that I will post pictures of kids if I'm sharing a tweet from the school. Like and it includes me in it, then I will reshare it, because I figured if they put it on their site, then I'm probably covered and allowed to share that picture. But that's just my practice. Otherwise, I try to blur their faces or get the back of their heads or something, just because I'm paranoid that I would get a nasty email from a parent. John.
So I have pulled up the form, and it says as follows, and you can tell a lawyer wrote it. For and in consideration of benefits to be derived from the furtherance of the educational programs of the School Board of Orange County, Florida, we personally and on behalf of student name, do hereby consent and authorize and grant permission to the board and OCPS and their respective members, superintendents, agents, and employees and representatives of each to take a photograph, video, footage, or likeness with or without sound, collectively images of the student, and do further consent that such images may be broadcast or published in perpetuity by all public media known and in the future, including but not limited to
John,
local
can you
newspapers.
get closer to the mic.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You can do it. There we go. Get rid of this. Oh, yes. There we go. So it talks about also the internet, websites online, or any other type of social media or duplication. as for the purposes the board and OCPS deem appropriate. What is intended when we do that is it's a collective usage of the board as an entity rather than individual board members, and the district as a collective entity. So that's what the purpose of this form is. That's what it's intended to do. Obviously, if, with respect to the question of individual students going up on your individual Facebook pages, unless you're sure that that student has, filled out the internet release, I would not do it as a practice, because, you could have a very upset parent coming back saying, I've specifically opted out of this, and then that's a problem. But, I think what Member Gallo said or Chair Gallo said, as far as, taking the photos of the back of heads, that's not personally identifiable. So you won't have to see a student that way. If you get a face of a student, you could do things with the photo with respect to, having somebody blur the face out if you do get a random face in there. But if you don't have this release on file, I think it's going to be very problematic if you post it on Facebook if a parent gets upset, or any other social media. I'm old, I use Facebook, so.
So, quick question. We have a wonderful photographer, Frank. I think he's no longer in the building. But I know that he followed us around and took some great pictures, and those pictures are generally shared with the board in a Google Drive. If we receive those as part of a Google Drive, can we make the assumption that we are allowed to share those pictures since they were taken by our photographer on social media?
No, I would not make that presumption. Just because you don't know if those students have filled out the release or if some of them have opted out of it. So what we would have to do is we would have to get the photo. We would probably have to take it back to the school.
There's Frank's back.
There's Frank.
Hello, Frank. I was in the control room, sorry. Yeah, yes, okay. All right, so we probably do need clarification on that, because I would have, and I haven't, but if it was sent to me in a Google Drive, I'm assuming that I can use those in my newsletter. I don't know that I would necessarily post them online unless I was looking for something, but I would assume that I could use those in a newsletter that goes out to my constituents. I would feel like that would be appropriate, because they were sent to me and it was taken by the staff photographer. Dr. Vasquez.
Go ahead.
So I would probably say that 98% of the time when we're out visiting and they select the classrooms that we're going to, the classrooms that they're taking us to, the forms have been filled out. However, when we're walking, on the first day of school, we walked to the cafeteria or we had breakfast or lunch, those probably, unless it's the back of their heads. So what we can do is we can communicate to our schools that when we're visiting, that they please make sure that the classrooms that we're visiting, the students have completed the release form, because pictures may be taken and we will be sharing them.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. And even, I know we're all starting to do our visits to our schools. Many of us have brand new principals that will be visiting. So just when board members visit the school, if we're asking to be walked around, that same thing applies.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes. Whether it's, I thought us. Yes, us.
I just want to clarify. Okay, perfect.
Dr.
Then that would help with that issue.
And Dr. Armbruster can put something out in the deputy's newsletter so that it goes out, and then we can make sure it's shared.
Right, I'm going to, I think Member Castor-Dental's not finished and she has something to add, so I'm going to go back to Member Castor-Dental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I still see a difference in the official board member newsletter that they put out with photos of students with that permission, but I see a difference on a board member's personal social media, even of that same picture, even with the kids having a release. I don't think the parents are truly, again, consenting to the use of our personal media or social media for that picture. So I just think it's, if it's not a policy, then it should be a practice that we avoid showing those pictures of students. We can take pictures of our, our visits to schools with principals, with artwork, the staff, their adults. You can ask them, can I share this on my social media? They can give you that permission without a problem. It's the students that I'm concerned about, and that whole consent, even when parents, again, sign the release, they may not be imagining all the different ways that we may use that photo. So that's my concern.
So, Madam Chair, may I?
I forgot. That was me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So we could do one of two things, I guess. What we could do is and it wouldn't apply to this year because that form's already gone out and been signed or not signed, or we could revise the form to say included but not limited to, the usage could be on individual board members' social media. Or we could say, you know what, we're not going to revise the form that way, and then everybody understands that to the extent that you're using photos from a school, you shouldn't be using the image and likeness of a school. So I'm not going to get into which way I think is better, because that's a you all question rather than a me question, but I think we could revise the form to allow individual members to use it on social media, or we could say, what we're actually going to do is say we're not, unless you have a release from those particular kids, you're not going to post it on your social media.
Thank you, Mr. Palmerini. Is that it, Dr. Castellano, for you? Okay. Member Ferrant?
Thank you. I am in agreement with quite a few have already discussed that, having some sort of little statement at the top of a school board, a Facebook page, or if it's Twitter or wherever you're using your social media, just to communicate with parents and your constituents. So just stating something that this is your personal beliefs or personal opinion, whatever we want to, however you guys want to state that in writing, and then we would just all have that on our pages. I think that is fine. I agree. I don't think we need to have the state or or Orange County public schools dictating to any one of us how we need to be posting, sharing. That is our First Amendment right. And again, like Member Salamanca had stated, our constituents know who we are. They know what we stand for. That is why we got voted in. And so I believe it is our right. We don't check our First Amendment right at the door when we are elected. So I think that is fine. I think discussing the photos, I think that's good. Those are things that, as a new school board member, and even some that have been here for a while, we're not aware, because like was mentioned, photos that were taken by our district photographer at a school event with the superintendent, the same photo is posted on the Orange County's, the OCPS Facebook page or Twitter or whatnot. And then if we use the same photo, you're then saying that would be not appropriate because we are different because we are more of an elected official than, is that what you're saying? Or am I wording that differently? Because what I'm hearing then, because I use the same photo, so is that not okay? I used it, go ahead. Oh,
No.
Dr. Vasquez?
No, what I meant to say is that it has nothing to do with the board member. If we've posted them on our social media, then the assumption is that they've checked and that the releases for students have been completed and we can share it. I believe Board Member Gallo mentioned that there's a Google Drive that has some of those photos, and that maybe not all of those we verified. And so that's where we're going to make sure principals know that if a board member is visiting or staff is visiting, there's pictures being taken, we want to make sure that parents have given release so that we can share.
perfect. Okay, thank you so much. That definitely clarifies. I definitely want to make sure that we are in alignment with parents, and I wouldn't want to share something that if a parent hadn't given permission. So I do appreciate that. I think this is a good discussion, although I would rather be honestly discussing other things like how to help kids read and write and do other things, but it's good discussion.
Thank you, Member Front. Member Gould.
So I don't mind the disclaimer, but I don't think we are acting in the norm in the way that this is structured as elected officials. So I have some concerns about confusing our constituents. I have a page that is branded to the school board page. I have my personal page where I might put opinions of things. But on the school board page, I am reposting feeds that I think the overall community needs to have. And they have lots of pictures in them from my schools, from Orange Tech, from a play we went to, from a recognition I've done with a teacher in their classroom. And those kids want to be in the picture when I recognize teachers. So I think there's a base protocol we need to have a discussion on, not about our First Amendment rights, but about our role in communicating what's going on within the school district to our community, because we are that resource and that liaison. So, and we're mixing it up. Other elected officials have both. They have, and it may only say District 1 on their page or District 4 or whatever it is, and then it's branded to them, and they are communicating community meetings, events, parent academies, whatever that is, and I'm using that as an example. You can look at the county commission or the city commission pages, and it's the same thing. They are communicating that public work information there. And then on their private pages, they may be communicating their opinion about that, whatever that topic is, but they're disseminating the facts of the information. So my question to our board is, where are you disseminating that information that comes out of our board meetings or comes out of our schools that's pertinent, that is they can use that as their reliable source for you as the elected official? And then where are you combining those? I don't combine those. I never have. Because my opinion is my opinion, and when I say it's my opinion, I say I am not speaking on behalf of the board. This is my opinion or what I want you to know. And I don't put that on my school board page. Because those same people often are my friends or have followed me there or on LinkedIn or in 100 other places, especially in Twitter and that kind of thing. And again, I don't tend to use that platform for any of those platforms. I tend to use it as a communication tool to make sure the constituents and especially my families and my students know what's coming up, what they need to know about. Community meeting last night was a perfect example of that. I didn't put my opinion out there on how that meeting should go there. I shared to make sure everybody knew so that I could hear what their thoughts were, whether they were for or against the stadium moving back onto the luckily even the neighbors want it there, but just want some accommodations, please. And, but, I would like to hear from the board members how they are communicating those vital pieces of information that their constituents need to know to be engaged with us.
Thank you, Member Gould. So, Mr. Pomeranian?
So that legally versus what you all practice are two separate and distinct questions. Where we as the school board and as an entity and the district get into an issue is if the school board staff and school board resources are being utilized for a personal page. My understanding is the school board staff and school board resources are not being utilized for any of your social media, right? So now, from a district and school board as an entity liability, that's off of us. You all may legally choose to have a Pam Gould School Board Member District 4 page, and then just Pam Gould. You may also choose to say, I'm School Board Member Pam Gould District 4, and not have a personal page. But again, since it's your personal resources and no district staff is going into it, that's not official government's OCPS action. That doesn't, under the distinctions the law make.
So I need a follow-up there.
Yeah.
When we are sworn in as constitutional officers of the state, we are in an official capacity, correct?
You are, yes.
Okay. So if we are mixing the information as constitutional officers that we are supposed to be sharing and making sure the community at large knows on behalf of our member districts, that is a legal representation, is it not?
Not according to the 11th Circuit, it's not. If it is a private page, even if you identify yourself as Pam Gould, candidate, School Board District 4, or Pam Gould.
No, I understand that. It's, but you see, we're in this conversation, I understand that. And that's why I'm wondering, I don't want the district to have to control the page, but should there be a page provided to every board member to operate with a disclaimer on it saying that this is used as the official page of this, and still have that same disclaimer, but we have to have a place in as many ways as possible to communicate with our constituents. And I think we're mixing apples and oranges in this discussion and not separating them. And that's, I don't know, that's just, as a constitutional officer, that's my role, is to disseminate information so that we can engage all of the public in conversation. Then me as Pam Gould, I only want to talk about X, Y, and Z.
So I can tell you, if the district were to create pages for each one of you, the official District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and chair page, then the district becomes responsible for the content on it. We would have to do the vetting. None of that is what any of, I'm seeing your heads, none of you want that to be done, right?
Okay. Yeah, I don't want that to be done.
So if it's not that,
And that is how those other constitutional officers operate their page? They don't ever post anything themselves on those pages?
I try to stay off of it as much as I can. When I see a government posting, I don't look at what they're doing. Just
No,
because,
but I mean, take
Yeah.
any one of our commissioners who utilize that page, and they'll post the community stuff, which is really fed through the reshare or posted by, but then they'll also go out and take pictures with their constituents and show, we did a groundbreaking. We are going to have a community meeting to come up, and everybody in my district needs to come to that, no matter what your opinions are. Because we're representing all the people once we take that oath. We're not representing the ones we like, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this is my confusion on this blending. And I can see why our constituents, all of them, are confused.
So I will try to state it as clearly as I possibly can. Unless the district is operating your page, like district staff is being utilized, the district's, equipment is being utilized to do it, the law thinks everything else is your personal page. Whether you identify yourself simply as Pam Gould, or whether you identify yourself as Pam Gould, Board Member, District 4.
I understand that and what you're saying about the law. I understand it. But follow up. So I'm reposting lots of things that are on my schools pages, Orange Text pages, they feature students, so I can no longer do that.
No, you're.
No,
that's not what- no.
because you're also, remember, when that gets posted out there, it is in the public domain at that point. So once it's
Okay.
in the public domain, then you can repost that.
Gotcha. Well, I got confused about that, because that's what I thought I heard, but then I thought I heard in another sentence, even if we go into the classroom, we should not be the first to post that. So I'm clear now. I'm clear. All right. Thank you.
And I think everybody, I think everybody up here does social media differently. Like I have, I only have one official account on Facebook that will say Angie Gallo, District 1. And then on Twitter and Instagram, those are the only ones I'm on. I do use my personal account, and I do share a lot from my Instagram, or on Instagram you just like. I like a lot of the OCPS, and I do retweet a ton of stuff that I see on the OCPS news feed. And it is my personal, it's UCF alum, so it is my personal. And the only other thing you will find on there is me being snarky during football season. But it is my personal account, and I'm not going to make an Angie Gallo District 1 Twitter or one for Instagram, because then you have to recreate all those followers all over again, and it's just too much to manage. That's just. Yeah, I do, because when it comes to football, I'm gonna communicate. Member Felder.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have very much to say because everybody, I've been listening to all other board members in terms of your thoughts about the social media, but I do have a newsletter that comes out. My assistant, Arabia, does a very good job with the newsletters. And on most occasions, all of the occasions I've been at schools, the principals have asked, could we take pictures and, would you put this in your newsletter? I say, yeah, and I take pictures of it. And I've had this picture that Bridget, last year, 2 years ago, first day of school over at ACE, the pre-K, one of my former students, her last baby, was there. She was 4. So she said, oh, Miss Felder, come take a picture with my baby. So, and the little girl, she reached up and I took a picture. I said, I'm going to put it on Facebook. She said, okay, it's good. And Bridget got me an 8 by 10, so you come to my office, you see me with this little 4-year-old. So I'm the new Nana. But I'm just saying, I'm glad we're talking about this, because sometimes you don't know and you post people's pictures and parents may not like it, but I have just kind of put it in my newsletters, and most of the times you see pictures of me with kids or with people at school. They've asked me to take the picture, and are you going to post it? Because most principals, they want to take a picture with the school board member. They do. They want to do that. The kids do too. But we do. The only time I go on my Facebook page is District 5 when I'm running. I learned that a while back. Remember Goulds? When we were doing this thing with the mask, some disparaging things were sent to me, and Board Member Gould said, and I got angry and I responded. She said, Vicki, now you got to put it on something I had to do to make sure Sunshine covered. So now I don't even go on there because I don't know what kind of madness is going to come. But yeah, to transfer that I would not get in any kind of trouble. So my personal page is my personal page. I very rarely look at the board page because I'm not in campaigning yet. But when I do get in campaign season, I will look. But now I'm sure and understand about the picture thing. But I always ask because I know people are very personal about going on Facebook. And I don't, and on my campaign page, it's usually just me. I'm just talking, just talking about voting for me. And I do have a newsletter that most of the pictures in the newsletter, the people want me to put it in there because they know I have a newsletter. So, all right, I just want to share that.
Thank you, Member Felder. Member Byrd.
Thank you. I think you said it best, Mr. Pomeroy, when you said there's the legal side of them, there's, and I don't remember what the other term was used, but
Personal, legal and personal.
personal, right. Okay, so to me, this is more of, a kind of governance issue than it is legal issue, because, listen, the bottom line is, you could win that election on election day, get sworn into office, and then you could sit like a bump on the log for 4 years and not do a thing, not inform your constituents, not do anything. And there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it until the next election to vote you out, unless perhaps the governor removed you from office, but you'd have to do something pretty bad. But you literally could not be a great communicator with your community. You could, it doesn't really, that's the bottom line. There's nothing legally that can be done. So I don't know that working, I agree that we don't need a policy on it, because it's really just a governance issue and how we choose to govern as a school board member. We might want to think about bringing our school board governance policy. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I just pulled it up, and there's a lot of statements in there that I think might be worth looking at again and reviewing. And I don't know if maybe adding a statement in here that, and I think the difference here is that school board members are not employees of OCPS. And I think that's a distinction that we need to make, because that's the comment I've been getting a lot about social media, is how come a teacher can't post something, or, like a administrator. And I think that's the distinction we need people to understand. We do not work for OCPS. We are not under the same employment guidelines that employees are. So therefore, we have no way to discipline a board member for something if they do something that we wouldn't allow an educator to do. So I think that possibly adding that verbiage into that policy might be helpful to have people try to help the public understand the difference between a board member and an employee. And then as far as my social media, I have a separate Facebook page for when I'm campaigning that is Melissa Bird for Orange County School Board, and then I have my separate Orange County School Board member page. And, obviously I don't use anything from the school district on my campaign Facebook page. So I have those two separate ones for that reason. Then I have my personal Facebook page. But I do post a lot of pictures, and I'm with Member Felder. When I go to schools, oftentimes they'll say, can we get a picture with the debate club? And it's all the kids, and they want to take my picture, and they want me to put it on my school board member page. So I like the idea that the superintendent had. Let's just leave that to the schools to make sure that when we are at the schools visiting and we're taking pictures, or at a football game and, with the cheerleaders or whatever, that they've already covered that they know who has those forms. And I think that any parent that knows that has agreed and knows that it's going on social media, knows that if the school board member for the school is coming and puts the picture on social media, that's all part of it. I will say that I try to only use my Facebook page for disseminating information, but I do recall a few instances where I have had to use my Facebook page, or wanted to use my Facebook page, to solicit information or viewpoints from my community and my constituency when we've had hot topics. Like one of them, I remember when we were talking about school start times in the very beginning, I remember on my Facebook page asking them to email me their opinions, or how do you feel about this? And I didn't go comments, I didn't do back and forths, I wanted the input. And the same thing, one other time, it's only been like one time I've ever put my opinion about something, and it was when we were going through the COVID and the school reopening. And I felt very strongly about my opinion. And I think that those kinds of things are important in a way, because I think it's important for this is a governance issue, though. Again, this is not policy. So, but I think it is important for constituency that you are representing to know what you feel and what your stance is, because that helps inform them for that next election, if they want to vote for you again or not. And so I think there is room for those opinions. I do think, though, that the disclosure on the Facebook pages is a great idea. I think that the disclosure and then making it clear that we are elected officials and not employees, I think all of that is just, I think we just need to be a little more clear about all that. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great points. Thank you, Member Byrd. Member Castor-Dental.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm so glad I get to listen to my colleagues on the board, because I'm learning about ways to use my own social media. I currently have one Facebook page that's personal, and I use it for personal and for education topics, and I send things out there, and I try not to use it as an official page, but I know people know that I'm on the school board. So I think, like Member Gould was saying, I think it's going to be important to kind of differentiate those two sides and roles. So I don't think it's necessary for the school district to monitor our Facebook pages, but I do think it's important to have that separate page that does have that information that people can go to. And I think that's an easy fix. And my concern is still how we use student photos. Even if we have consent, I don't think it's the best practice to put kids' pictures all over the internet. Even if they're already there, even if someone else has already posted it. I just have problems with that. I used to put pictures of my kids on there because they were so cute. I wanted everyone else to see how cute my kids were. And then I realized, wait a minute. My daughter's like, I don't want you putting that on there. I'm like, oh, okay. So just because they have consent or a release form doesn't always mean that we should put their faces on. So that's where I will remain today.
Thank you, Member Castor-Dental. And I will say that I received a video from the human trafficking group, and it literally took a picture of a child from social media, and it grew that child up and associated them, like it was so scary. As a parent, if I had a small child, I don't know that I'd give anybody the right to use my child's image anywhere because of that. But Member Salamanca.
Thank you, Chair. I keep my pages separate as well. I have a personal page and then I have a school board page, and all things school board are on there. But I hear what you're saying, John. No, I get a lot of emails from constituents with the confusion between employee and school board and why an employee can, but we can. And I think having clarity on that is important. And I think it's just a general tough conversation because we all operate under very different norms and protocols for what we think an elected official is supposed to behave like. And that's something that is how we believe in our value system. But that is different than law. And it is something I try to communicate to my constituents all the time, that just because I operate a certain way or someone else operates a certain way doesn't mean that the law says one or the other is better or not. And it's our private pages and we get to do with it how we want. We're elected folks and we get to interact with our constituents the way we want. And it is, as Member Byrd said, when you're elected, there's actually there's not like there's a job description of what's expected of you. and you have to do this to be considered doing your job. It just, you just get to be it. And I understand the frustration that folks have, and it's unfortunate. It's just where we are in this country, that folks have made politics a big part of their identity, and we see it not just in school boards, but everywhere else, and it's just the reality of it. I don't think us trying to control the school board's media page is gonna stop a lot of this behavior. It's just the direction we're moving, and things are getting savvier on social media, and politicians are getting savvier as well. So while I would love for everyone on this board to follow the protocols and norms that have been used historically. I know, for example, on Twitter, the @POTUS basically gets handed down. Every single president gets that handle, and then everything gets cleared, but it is managed by White House staff. It is not managed by campaign staff or the individual. And so
That's right.
there have been best practices that unfortunately our law just doesn't follow. So I would be supportive of having, I think like in general, I struggle with, this is what I tell my constituents too, putting anything into policy that is not enforceable. Because what is the point of a policy if it's not enforceable? Then it's just a nice recommendation or a memo or like a nice norm or protocol. So if we as a district can't enforce something, then it doesn't make sense for us to have it as a policy, because then we find ourselves being in violation of our own policies, and then it becomes an incredibly uncomfortable and kind of really bad place to be in as a district. So I would love some guidance from you all on our views or my opinion or my own, and if that's possibly to be enforced as a policy or not, or if this is like something that we have to do separately as a memo internally.
So a couple weeks ago, I sent you a disclaimer language that you could put on your social media page. I can recirculate that email again.
But I think just from a general perspective for all three of us sitting right here, we do not in any way want a policy. It brings us into the legal realm of people being able to file claims under it, and it would not be good. I don't want us to be in a position where a constituent or somebody files a First Amendment claim saying that based upon your official OCPS policy about social media usage, this member violated it and therefore violated the First Amendment. It is not a recommendation from any of us that we have a policy on this, because it just opens us up to litigation where right now we are not.
And I guess one last question. So in the case of if we had a policy that said views are my own and please include it in that, and I, Maria, say I don't want to abide by this policy, and you're actually violating my rights, can I sue the district in that case?
There was a case in Houston that said, a case out of Houston Community College System that got to the United States Supreme Court on that, and the board censured the public official for various misdeeds, and he said, no, you're violating my First Amendment rights. And the Supreme Court said, well, you can as a board censure him because it didn't have any effect on his or her ability to continue in the job. They still were a member of that governing board, so it's not any tangible action. Could you sue us? We would probably cite to that case if you did, but at the end of the day, we're all engaged in expensive litigation that we would otherwise not be involved with if we had a policy.
Got it.
If we didn't have a policy, excuse me.
Then in that case, it seems enforceable enough where I would be comfortable having a policy saying that, school board members should have that. I don't know if there's any other meat on this bone that we can really add here. It seems like it's very light on our options, unfortunately, and folks will get to vote behavior, and if they approve or disapprove of how we behave and communicate with our constituents.
That's it.
Thank you, Member Salamanca. And I agree, this does not come with, there's no book that comes with becoming a school board member, which is why we go to training, and it's so important for us to get trained so that we know how to operate and we understand governance and we understand how to do our job. Member Front.
Okay, thank you. Definitely good discussion. I think most of us then here have a personal page, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, or whatever you're on, Facebook, and then we have one page, because I don't know how anybody really could handle more than one page that would be there. That's too much to think about. Something I have personally had a lot of people questioning is, like I shut comments off on Facebook, for instance, because once I got in, it seemed a lot of people, well, maybe not a lot, but certain individuals like to state completely false claims. You want to call me names, call me names. You want to say you don't like me, I don't care, that's fine. But when you make false accusations, those are things, so as part of Sunshine, I now have to leave that there. It now looks like it could be fact. I mean, you don't know. You know how everybody is. They read somebody's comment and goes, that happened? And that did not happen. And then I also have had people delete a comment, email the entire board and say, Alicia Ferrant is deleting my comments on Facebook. Oh, girl, I got 5 kids, and I'm trying to do school board, and I got an orphanage we're building. I got way too many things than to be looking and reading people's comments and deleting certain individuals' comments. So for me personally, I decided to just shut off all comments, and it is more like a active newsletter is how I have seen it. And it's something where I just share my information, and I always say in there, if you want to get a hold of me, here's my email. And it just makes it a lot more, it makes it easier in the sense that I don't have to be going back and going, okay, did somebody delete a comment? Did they not? How do I capture that? It's a lot more work for the requests, records requests, and all those kind of things. So I think in that sense, I like the fact that we do have that leeway as a board. Some may decide they want to keep their comments on, some may want it off, some may not ever want to post, some may want to post. So I think if we had a policy, I just think it creates more confusion and more, like you were saying, Mr. Pomeraney, about now you're opening a can of worms for people to come and say, okay, I'm going to use this against you. Instead of saying, that's on you. Maybe you could do an MOU that just says, the OCPS would like for all school board members to post this on their official social media account. And there's nothing really nothing could happen. There's nothing legally that could happen, but I think then it can kind of cover us to say, hey, we did inform them to do this, but that's it. And I mean, I think all of us would be in favor of putting that on our social media. I don't think that's a problem. But I do think, I would personally have a problem having a policy, because I just think maybe you can enforce it, but honestly, we don't have the time, the money. We have way better things to be worrying about than, policing people's social media accounts.
Thank you, Member Farad. Member Castor-Dental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree about not creating a policy, but also clarifying, like Member Byrd said about, what did you say? Yes, the difference between board members and employees. And also, I'm glad that Member Ferrant brought up the comments. I know that if you have a page, I know people will comment, but if you turn off the comments, it helps. I guess they'll realize when they try to comment. But I have a question about if people are blocked on those pages, if that's legal as a public official, or you're not allowed to block someone or how does that work if they're harassing you and it's...
So, Madam Chair, may I?
Absolutely, Mr.
So there is a circuit split with regard to that that's going to the U.S. Supreme Court. If you have an official Facebook page, like it's a government-run Facebook page, for example, if the school district were to run it, the Ninth Circuit says you can't block people who are disagreeing with you, being nasty with you, you have opened up the forum. The Sixth Circuit has says, yes, you can block people who disagree with you. So the United States Supreme Court is going to decide that case next year. You have the choice. It is always your choice on whether you open a forum. You can choose to keep a forum closed and say, I'm posting this, but I'm not going to allow people to comment. That is always going to be 100% legal. The question the Supreme Court is going to decide, especially since you all are public officials, and while it is your personal private pages, you still post things about your duties sometimes on it. The question the Supreme Court's going to decide next term is, in that case, can you block people who disagree with you and who are nasty, or can you not? So right now, the question is an open one. It'll get decided one way or the other next year. And we will certainly update you all with that information once that case comes down, because you're going to need to know it, because I don't want you guys to get sued. The safest way right now is, if you don't want to have that kind of interaction, because, you know, people are not the nicest on social media, is that the euphemism for it? To say, you know what, I'm not opening comments. And as a reminder, everybody here has a public email address. If folks want to get a hold of you because they have a question about something that's going on with the school district, they can always email you. That is an avenue that's open. I mean, obviously, they can come to school board meetings. They can speak to you all in either in public comment period, if it's not on the agenda, or about agenda items. There are ways to get a hold of you other than social media. So, but your question's going to be answered next year, one way or the other.
Okay, follow up? So it sounds like, I like the Pam Gould style of communicating with the constituents. I really appreciate that, the way you differentiated those. And it's not difficult, and I need to do that. I need to set up a separate OCPS Facebook for Karen Castor-Dental. But that would be considered a professional page, not necessarily an official page.
Right.
So it's still personal, but for my constituents and the community, to help differentiate and make it easier for them to understand the differences between my personal and school-related, that seems to work.
Yes.
And I know not everyone on the board does the same thing. I don't use Twitter much. Every once in a while, I'll retweet something from OCPS, but I don't think I have many followers. I don't think it really goes very far. But I do think this discussion has been helpful, and I do think that we don't have to put it in policy, but it would be helpful, I think, to have it in writing somewhere, even if it's just in the guidance for new members or even old members. Just maybe how others use social media and what are some of our options. And so we can avoid some of these problems that we bring upon ourselves.
Right.
So that's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Castor-Dental. So, you're fine. Member Byrd.
No, I was just going to say, I'm reading more the board policy, the governance policy, and I'm looking at like the global governance commitment, and then there's the governance style. There's definitely some bullet points in here that I think we have to readdress, specifically one that says the board will enforce upon itself whatever discipline is needed to govern with excellence. Not really sure how we do that. So I definitely think we need to review it, but the reason I cued in is because I think that we could probably include something, clarification within this policy about communication, because it does talk about communication in here. Now I don't know where it was, but it does talk about will establish how the board will establish how they communicate with their with the citizens of Orange County, blah 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 blah. So I think that this is definitely the policy B that we could maybe come back and visit for that.
Thank you, Member Byrd. I think that's a great idea. And maybe if it has to do with communication, we could put the disclaimer language in there so that the public can see the disclaimer language. Because I think we were all in agreement that we're okay with the disclaimer language. Was there anybody that is uncomfortable with the disclaimer language? No.
Not, I'm just confused about where I'm going to put it. Like, I'm looking on my page, I'm like, I don't know where it would go. So maybe we could talk to Scott.
Yeah, Mia, maybe Mr. Howitt can help us out. I would just like to say for the record that as a district, the district OCPS Facebook page during certain times we shut off our comments too. Like, we've shut them off. So it's not just Member Front that has her comments on. We've done it too in times when we couldn't respond and negative information and bad information was being shared and we couldn't control and make sure it was correct information. So, yeah, just throw that out there. Okay, so do you, Mr. Pomerini, Mrs. Inval, do y'all have the guidance needed to move forward with some type of change to, it sounds like, our governance policy? Would any other board member like to add anything else before we adjourn the meeting? Sure.
I was just going to say, just in reference to where you would put that, you can, in the About section on Facebook, for instance, there's a little section, so you could word it in there. And then you also can pin posts. So you could make a post, and then you pin it, and it stays at the top. So for instance, I have one that says contact info, and it's the first thing you see every time. So no matter what I share, contact info is always at the top, and it shares my email. I also shared any of yours if they need it, the superintendent's, legal, I don't know who else they would need to get a hold of, but things like that. So that's the last thing.
Thank you for that. Put that as part again. All right, seeing no further business before the board, we are adjourned.